Boom. I think we're live. It should be good. And once it pops up, I'll pull everything. Yeah. So there we go. There's that. I'm going to minimize that. And I'll pull the chat over. So if anyone...
You think you're live now?
Should be live now.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So pretty much just anybody who's checking in, hopping in here with us. So the idea behind all this whole night is pretty much we wanted to do a current events thing just for the month of January and maybe past or whatever. It doesn't have to just be January, but you know, we can't do every single week or every single day. So what we want to do was just bring something together where we just have a group of guys talk about the things that are going on in our immediate area, in our country, in the world and all that, and just share our opinions on that. And, you know, just have if somebody doesn't want to, you know, look up all the crap, we can just bring it up to the forefront. And if someone wants to know our opinions, we can share those too. So anyways, one other thing that I wanted to do too, before we kind of really get kicked off and started is, I don't think I've done a good job of like saying who is here like with me. And especially with 4 people talking, it'd be easier to like cue in voices. If everyone just says like their name and I don't know what they do for work or something, that just, I don't know if that's interesting or not, but everyone knows me. I'm Dallas. And I do this podcast for work. We'll go this way and just go around the table real quick.
So I'm Matthew. I do materials engineering. And I'm pretty into politics.
Nice, I like it. I'm Darren, and I am a master finish carpenter. I work in the upstate, and I have a lot of fun doing it.
And I'm Michael. I do concrete for a living, and yeah.
You own your own company. We got the advertisement.
Yeah, we got merchandise.
We
We'll
almost
link
forgot our
that in the
sponsors.
description.
Our sponsors for tonight. It's
Yeah,
Spearhead Concrete
Yeah.
and
Michael's
Tailored
little
Finish
company.
Carpentry.
Oh, hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. So tonight, I don't know. You might have to even talk a little bit closer than the whole fist away because it sounded pretty low on that. But I don't know where you guys wanted to start with this. I thought we could kind of start with maybe the ATF thing because that was kind of a hotter topic in recent times. Does anybody want to give a gist statement of what's going on? Michael, would you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll try not to butcher it too much. So from my understanding, the ATF is coming out with new rulings against pistol braces. And they're essentially making them illegal now after, you know, I would say thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of Americans own them. I don't know any of the data on that, but so new rulings by the ATF on that, which is obviously creating a lot of controversy within the gun community, and I guess we can talk about how that's affecting everyone.
Huh? You just said
Turn it up.
Turn
Yeah.
what up?
Turn the little knob.
I don't have a
Can't
knob.
hear it. Oh, you don't have a knob?
No, it's all right here.
Okay.
It's all right there.
Okay.
I got my headphones turned up. I might have to mess with a few settings here and there, but yeah. So, what are you guys' kind of just thoughts on the whole thing in general, like the whole ATF thing? I know Darren had kind of came to me and you had said, because we had a conversation the other day, and you were just kind of saying like, I don't get the point of this. I don't understand why, and all that. So what do you think of that, or what do you think of the whole thing like in general?
I don't know. I think it's a big deal to, you know, obviously a lot of people on these. There's 5 to 10 million of these weapons out there. It's a little annoying that, you know, they're trying to regulate it, but at the same time, pretty much the biggest point I was making, like, if they do regulate it or if they do say it's illegal, there's not much you can do about it at this point other than contact your local representative. I mean, because if it's law, whether or not we agree with it, whether or not if it's an infringement on our rights, our Second Amendment right, then, you know, we can fight that, obviously. But at the end of the day, if they say it's illegal, there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah, I think that if we're being honest about the conversation, what people want is to lessen like gun deaths and like they want to make everything like safer, and that's the whole point of like what the left is pushing for. But the idea is like this isn't going to stop gun death. Like banning a pistol brace, like it doesn't really do anything. The idea behind it, though, what the ATF is using as a reasoning is that there's a loophole, is what they're saying. The idea is you can make a pistol into a rifle and make it what they say is just as dangerous, but the idea is that they can classify it as a pistol and you can basically own it as if it's a rifle. Yeah. I don't think. I mean, I guess in a way,
A short barrel rifle.
yeah, a short barrel rifle. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Like, but the idea is it doesn't. If anyone comes out and they say, "Oh, this is gonna like lessen gun deaths," or "Oh, this is good for the country," it doesn't really do anything. I would disagree. But like, yeah, I think there are many other things that people should push for in terms of like actually like regulating gun control. But this isn't. This is kind of just cringe.
Yeah, I don't see how this is going to affect any sort of gun deaths or gun violence. I don't think it's going to make it go down at all.
So one of the things that I was kind of, and I'm not, don't quote me on this exactly, but so I'd watched one of the guys' videos talking about this, and he was talking about the history of the NFA laws and stuff like that, and he was like holding up different guns, and he's like, "This isn't illegal. This is illegal," and he held up like this. I don't know, it looked like some sort of weird pistol. And
Yeah, I had a big barrel on the back.
yeah, it was really weird looking. He's like, "This is totally legal to have as a pistol," and then he held up like an M4, like a short barrel, like just a military style M4, like an old school one, with like an 11-inch barrel. And he's like, "This is illegal." He goes, "This doesn't even make any sense." And I think the gist of what he was saying was, back in the day, there was this ruling that went through the ATF, and they didn't want to, like, they wanted to take away pistols pretty much, or make pistols less available for people to have. And one of the fears that the government had was people were going to take rifles and cut them down to use them as pistols. And one of the, like, whenever I hear that, the first thing I think of, have you guys ever seen the picture of that? It's like the Oberez or something. They took like a Mosin and they cut it down to a pistol. Have you ever seen those?
I think so, yeah.
That's in Tarkov, I think they have those.
Yeah, they have them in that, and they had them in like Battlefield 1 and stuff.
Yeah.
Have you seen those?
Yeah, they're like really. As soon as the stock ends, that first little gap, they cut it.
It's like that big, and it's a full like Mosin action.
It looks like a flintlock pistol.
Yeah, and it's bolt action, so you like shoot it and then pull the bolt.
Yeah.
So dangerous.
So they were worried about people like doing that. Well, I think like 10 years later, so they made it so that you can't have a rifle with this unless you had, this barrel length or whatever. So then a couple years later, the government sold a bunch of excess carbines, and I can't remember the full name. It feels like, I think it's an M1 carbine. It's like a World War II rifle, and they sold a bunch of them. And the government was like, "Oh no, those barrels are all 16 inches, and we just made like 1 million Americans felons because they're not allowed to have a rifle that has a shorter barrel than 18 inches." And the carbine had a 16-inch barrel. So they're like, "Oh, we'll just make the new ruling 16 inches." And that's where the traditional SBR rules and stuff come from now, is the 16-inch barrel. But the thing that this particular person was talking about, he was saying they eventually did away with the whole pistol part. And the only reason why we had the rifle part was because of the pistol part. Because they wanted to discourage like concealing pistols or stuff.
Concealment, yeah.
Concealing pistols and stuff. And they're worried about the rifles, so they're like, "Oh, we'll make a rule for the rifles too." Well, then they did away with the pistols, but they never went back and looked at the rifle part.
Yeah.
And even like with any amount of common sense, it's like I mean, we all know at least somewhat about guns a little bit, and it's like, if you have, how big's a short barreled rifle? Like yay big or something, maybe a little bit smaller,
Like that.
depending on your barrel length and stuff. And what do you know the barrel length when like a 5.56 starts to become like not really worth shooting that short of a barrel? I think it's like 10 inches. 10 inches is when you really start like losing velocity and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
exactly sure on that.
I think it's 10 inches. And if you take a 10-inch AR and you wanted to conceal that, compared to a Glock, any other pistol out there with a 17-round magazine that you can get, for anything from a 17 round mag, you can get up to a 50 round mag for, for any pistols now. It's like the difference between like concealability and like lethality
Yeah.
is like, it's not even comparable. I would say or I wouldn't even say like one's more dangerous than the other. I think it'd be way easier and probably better to take, if you wanted to cause harm or something, it'd be way easier to do it with a pistol. And the whole law just doesn't even really make sense. Like that's kind of where I'm going with all this.
Something that I kind of wanted to talk about is like, there's a lot of people in America who want like gun control. I think it's like 60 to 70% America, and most studies say that they want stricter gun control. And most of the time, those questions are like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" They're kind of like weirdly worded. But the idea is, I believe that most of America probably wants more gun control because they live in a city. They probably don't have enough money to go and buy an extra gun. They probably just want like the crime rates to go down in general in their cities. But the problem is when these people want gun control and people on the right don't want gun control, they're saying we're not going to do anything, we just want it to stay right where it is, then the people who are going to be making these laws are going to be people who don't know shit about guns,
Mm-hmm.
So I think that what the right could do is kind of like step up and say, all right, we'll make gun control, but we're going to make it in our way. We're going to do it like this or like that, or make it to where it's like there were some really good laws I read the other night. Like if you have kids in the house, you're required to have like a gun safe or some sort of protection on your guns to where the kids can't get a hold of them. Like that's like a really.
Well, even criminals too.
What do you mean, like?
But so criminals can't get a hold of them.
No, yeah, that's true. Yeah. And like just stuff like that's where like the accessibility of guns within the house is like restricted, or like there's like I doubt you guys would agree with red flag laws. I like red flag laws. I know that you guys probably won't like them, but like there's other things like that make sense that I think the right could push for because they know more about guns than the left. But I think where we're at right now is people on the right don't want to do any gun control, so they're not proposing anything, and people on the left who don't know shit about guns are like proposing all these stupid laws.
I'll say what I'm going to say real quick, then I'll go to you. I think that some of the proposed things on guns and gun control and stuff like that, I think they couple different things. They sound good in theory, but when you really break them down, it's not necessarily that they wouldn't work as intended, but they break other rights that we have as Americans. And that's one of the biggest things that people get hung up on. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say not even gun control for the right, but just gun, like, if they were going to push anything, I think that they would want to push, like, gun education. Because that's every gun enthusiast, whatever background that goes to hunting, competitive shooting, anyone who uses a gun, that's the biggest thing is, like, always safety first and, like, educating yourself on like the safety rules, how to load, unload safely, everything. So I think just having a more educated population on firearms, because we are a country with firearms. We're never not going to be a country with, like, even everyone goes back to Australia, gun buyback or whatever, confiscation, whatever they did there. That will never be the United States.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want it to be the United States. I think that we should have firearms, and I just think everyone needs to get a little bit more educated on them. Even though I'm sure there's a lot of the population that doesn't want to get educated on firearms.
And one of the things I think too is like you can litigate and you can try and make things safer, for example, right? But just say, for instance, let's just take it out of the gun realm and put it in vehicle. Like, some people will get their license and there's all these precautions put in the way of getting your license, driving a motor vehicle, insurances, registrations, all these things. And there are still going to be people out there who just suck at driving, they're too crazy at driving, or they're driving, insane, and they get in accidents and they kill people. And it's like, you get to a point where it's like you just have to be better as people. You have to be more, I don't even know if educated is the right way to say about this, because I think everyone is decently educated on cars because they're so common. But I guess you could say the same thing about guns too. A lot of people who own guns are pretty well educated on them. But there comes a point when it's like, sometimes like there's not much more that you could do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think pushing like gun education, and I think specifically, if I was going to say gun education, I would say like one of the biggest things is, there's already laws on the books for automatic firearms. Like a massive majority of people don't even know that. They think that you can just go out and buy an automatic firearm because of the verbiage used by politicians. And this is a fully semi-automatic rifle and like stuff like that. It's like, come on, like
even assault rifle, assault pistol,
assault
the newest
pistol.
one that we
Yeah.
have.
We'll talk about that in a second.
But I want to like red flag laws. What are that's as far as like
The idea behind it is that if there's any sort of case where you have a family member, which it's different in every single state, it's completely like, I believe Florida was the first one to put, no, it was Connecticut for the first one to push this. Florida is the one that mainly enforces this. They actually have the most confiscations out of any state. But the idea is that if there's someone in your family that is like, you feel is like, they probably shouldn't be having a gun, like you think they're going to hurt themselves or other people, which most of the time it's themselves. That's where these laws come in. You basically can take it to court and you can like get a warrant from a judge and they can go in and they can take this person's guns, which most of the time, I think in like, it's like 90 something percent or 80 something percent of cases, maybe it's a very high rate of cases. These people willingly give up their guns, but there are cases where people don't give up their guns and it becomes like a shitty scenario. But overall, the idea is, from what I've seen from that law, it seems like it reduces suicides to some extent.
well, yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, as far as I thought it was more of like, well, this person was caught, around a school with a 12-inch sword. Like, well, yeah, you don't want him just buying a pistol. So I thought maybe that was like some kind of regulation where they can't even go buy one anymore.
Yeah.
Is that a thing or no?
No.
Yeah.
Red flag laws are specifically you're mentally ill. So us as a family is going to petition the government so you can't have a firearm.
Yeah.
And me and Matthew talked a little bit about this in our last thing, and I have since like looked up a few things on it. And I think Matthew got me to say, like, in a perfect world, I think they would work, but we don't live in a perfect world. And one of the things that I just heard and that really was interesting is for a lot of these decisions that we make, that the government makes and stuff like that, is they're, for the most part, objective things. There's data that you can look at, there's numbers and stuff like that. And I was listening to a guy and he was talking about how red flag laws can be so subjective. And I was like, man, that's interesting. I hope he gives an example. He gave an example and the guy goes, I've been in this thing in the military. I worked for the CIA and now now I don't like red flag laws because of this. And he goes on to explain some of his friends have gotten their guns taken away because of red flag laws because they had PTSD. And so he's like, I know for a fact I don't have PTSD. But the questionnaire that I had to fill out when I was doing all of my, what is it when you get out of the military, when they go to check your disability, is there a word for that?
Like a VA rating.
Yeah, like his disability rating, they had him take all these questionnaires. And he's like, these questionnaires are so subjective. And so he went on to explain a little bit about it. He said, the questions are like, have you ever been in combat? Yes. Have you ever killed somebody? Yes. Do you have nightmares? Or do you have dreams about this? He's like, I have dreams all the time about it, but my dreams aren't nightmares.
Yeah.
Like, he's like, I'm having dreams of like me and all my guys, because he's like, I did this for 20 years. And me and all my buddies, this is what we did. This was our job for 20 years. And so if I have a dream, it's about that.
Yeah.
And he goes, I checked yes. Like, I do have dreams, but they're not nightmares. And they're like, you have PTSD because you put that you were in combat, you killed somebody.
It's just a trap.
And you have nightmares. And he's like, no, I don't have PTSD. I know I don't. And like, no, well, because of the questionnaire, you do. He goes, I'm not struggling. He goes, look, I had, 3 of my friends kill themselves. He goes, I'm not struggling with that. Mm-hmm. And so what he's afraid of is they're going to go back, look in his records, the government or the VA or whoever, or a family member or somebody who dislikes him or an ex-spouse or something like that, and go, he has PTSD, he's unhinged. And then they go back and they, well, does he have PTSD? And they look at his questionnaire. Yes, I have dreams about, kicking in doors and shooting bad guys, and like, oh, he has nightmares. That's one of the side effects.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think that I don't think Matthew's wrong. I bet you 80% of the time, maybe even 90% of the time, somebody is totally unhinged, and someone goes to petition a judge, and the judge says, "Yeah, go ahead." But it's that 10 or 20% of the time where it's like, no, this person's really fine, and it's like, hey, look, we have all the subjective material backing up what this person is saying to go take their guns, even though the person's fine. And then I would say, maybe not Matthew, but you and I both know the amount of fighting that person would have to do to get them back, if ever.
Yeah.
That's kind of, and so that was that was like an anecdotal one side of the red flag law conversation.
I can give like the kind of like my best take on both sides if you want.
Sure.
About it. So the idea is the best take that I've seen like for it was that there's a questionable study kind of from I believe it was a study for Connecticut, and the idea was that whenever they studied it, they said that around 1 in about 11 people who had their guns taken away, or 1 in 11 suicides were prevented because they took these guns away in Connecticut. And the idea was that they did the study not basically based off the Connecticut's numbers, because there's like, I don't think they did it like off of like because when I read the study, they didn't actually have like any full numbers of all the suicides in Connecticut. But the idea was that they said that because firearms typically have a higher suicide rate than like that, more like basically if you attempt suicide with a firearm, you're gonna be more likely to go fully through the suicide than if you did like pills or any other method. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that if you're able to take the guns away, they're still committing suicide, but they're not able to be as successful with it. And the idea is that's where these red flag laws come in. That's where they're saying that they can reduce suicides with. But the argument against that is like, if you make all these things saying like, if you're mentally ill, we'll take your guns away, that's going to cause people to go and say, I'm just not mentally ill, when they are mentally ill. And that's going to make that's where that problem comes in. But I don't see a good way to like, the idea is, it's almost like everyone's like, oh, this is a mental health issue. It's like, well, then what do you do with mental health issues then? Like, it's like
that's where I would go with it. I would say, well, back up from, instead of trying to litigate the guns and the red flag laws, it's like go straight to the source type thing.
But the thing is, how do you go straight to the source? Like, what's
that gets into the same question as how do we make these drivers not shitty? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just like an open-ended, never-ending thing.
But then you have these people who, like 67% of people want gun control, and they're going to push for it. And the idea is you kind of have to, like, someone has to provide some laws to lower some sort of gun death measure or some sort of thing to do that. Otherwise, they're just going to keep pushing for it, and they're going to get shitty laws like the ATF brace, And that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, do you have anything to say, Michael?
Yeah, so I had two things on the red flag laws. So you had said that most of the time when this happens, it's someone who's going to harm themselves. Normally they turn in their guns like, without resisting or anything. So what that kind of shows me is it really even necessary to have that law in place? Or do you think even if just their family went to them and were like, hey, because they're the ones calling in the red flag law or however it works, hey, we're going to come in and take your guns from you because we don't think you're safe with them. And if they're willing to hand it over to, I guess law enforcement's a little more intimidating than just like your family members, but if you're willing to hand it over, I feel like you're willing to hand it over. Mm-hmm. And then, so the biggest thing with red flag laws that people don't like is not just the red flag law themselves. A lot of people don't like them, the red flag laws themselves, but it's mostly red flag laws with no knock policies. So they can go in, flag you. And this isn't, a family member, someone, this is your neighbor that you get in an argument with, and they know that you're a gun owner, or, just strife between people and say, this guy's crazy. He has a bunch of guns in his house. You need to do something about it right now. Like, well, do you have any proof or anything? Like, no, we'll just go through the red flag law, do a no-knock raid on his house. You own guns. Someone kicks in your front door, doesn't say it's the police, and they're pointing guns at you. You're going to shoot them. And now you just shot a police officer, and then you get in a gunfight and then end up.
It's like a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. There's no way. No-knock laws should almost never be a thing unless there's like very, very good evidence that it's bad things happening in the house.
I believe it's almost all states do this. I think there's 19 states that have this. The idea is most people who know they're like to have an idea that they're going to get their guns taken away because they have to go to court and they can actually like have like sort of like an argument in court and have like between a judge to say like are you going to have your guns taken away, are you not going to have your guns, like there's actually like they go through a court process with, it's not just like someone says, oh, this guy's dangerous, go take his gun.
What if your ex-wife has more money and hires a better lawyer? Then it becomes then it could potentially just be like a legal battle thing, and we all know that sometimes legal battles don't go the way they should. And my biggest thing, here's my biggest thing, right? And this is like an American. Well, it's not just American. I explain in a second, but for the most part, it's like I'd rather let 100 guilty men go free than make one innocent man suffer.
Who said that?
Huh?
Who said that?
I don't know who said it.
I don't know off the top of my head. I think it's one of the founding fathers.
So I think it was Jefferson.
Yeah.
I think it might have been Jefferson. And Jefferson, if I'm correct, got it from another guy who in turn got it from the Bible. That's where that comes from. It comes from Sodom and Gomorrah. And so pretty much like us as a country, us as a justice system is willing to let 100 guilty people go free so that we don't put one innocent man in prison. And we all know innocent people still get put in prison, but that's just kind of like a rule of thumb for some of the laws that we have. And that is just kind of like my moral belief around a lot of laws and stuff like that, is if it's going to infringe a certain percentage, there's got to be some cutoff point, I guess. But if it's going to infringe on good, healthy, law-abiding people and cause issues for them, then it needs to be thought about more, looked at more. And I think just the whole gun thing in general, like a lot of the laws and rules, like they already don't make sense. And even for example, me and Michael had talked. I'll let Michael explain this in a second. But even the automatic gun things, like there is a certain like area where you probably wouldn't want like a mass shooter to have an automatic firearm. But in some cases, it's like we had this discussion before of would it actually be more beneficial if a bad person had an automatic firearm? Do you remember that conversation?
I think so. Yeah, because with automatic weapons, you would obviously burn through ammo way faster. You're less accurate. But is it, people who are really, kind of well with firearms that are doing these mass shootings, that know how to conserve ammo, that know, different ways of shooting to take people out the fastest and most effectively? Like, I don't know if saying an automatic weapon would increase or decrease. I don't really think like an automatic weapon would really increase someone's like lethality, because you're going to be so less accurate. Obviously, if it's just a giant crowd, you just hold the trigger and go back and forth, whatever. But
then you get stuck reloading too.
Yeah, you're going to burn through a 30-round mag in no time.
And with recoil, it's very hard. Like, I've never shot in a automatic gun. That'll be the first thing I'll say. So I'm shooting in the wind here, but I know Michael has.
Yeah, no, honestly, thinking about it that way, if you just give some kid who's fed up with everyone a fully automatic, even AR-15, like that thing's just shooting straight up into the sky. They're not doing anything with it. This is a story I heard one time. There's an instructor. It was at like a shooting range. It's off topic, but there's an instructor teaching a girl how to shoot like it was like a Uzi or Tech 9 or something, and it was automatic. And she had was holding it, and she pulled the trigger, and it started going up. And the instructor was like standing behind her, and the recoil went straight up, straight back, and shot the instructor, like killed him. Mm. And it's like that. I don't even think that wasn't like an AR or anything. It was like a 9mm automatic, and that thing had enough recoil that this 12-year-old girl or something like that couldn't control it, and it went back, shot the instructor. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, maybe obviously if someone had like a gun like that machine gun right there, that would be, I don't think necessarily people
that would have to be some litigation that if you wanted that, you'd have to go through all these hoops and stuff like that. But like an AR that was automatic, I don't think it'd make that big of a difference, especially when you have all this other tech. Like, have you ever seen like binary triggers and stuff like that? Do you know what those are?
No. Oh, is that like you pull it and like it for every like motion it shoots like twice or something?
So when you pull the trigger, it shoots, and when you let go of the trigger, it shoots. And it actually will shoot sometimes. Some triggers, I think if they're quick enough, can shoot faster than an automatic gun. So then that's not even bump stocks. I think those triggers are illegal now. There was some.
Yeah, I don't know. I know there's electronic triggers as well that you can get, but I don't know. All that stuff is probably illegal or so just a hair away from being illegal that you probably don't want to get caught with it anyways.
And the behind what Mike was saying too about the whole education part, it's just like a lot of these things, like even suppressors, like suppressors are illegal. They make your gun silent, and it's like they don't though. They don't make a gun silent.
Do you know why we call them silencers?
Why?
And so the whole reason why there's like this huge stigma with suppressors is because when they first invented them, they marketed them and called them silencers because it was better for marketing because people think, oh, it silences your weapon. It doesn't. It makes it a lot quieter. And that marketing from the beginning is coming around and now biting the suppressor community in the butt because now people believe that it silences your weapon. You can sneak into someone's house and then they're sneak out without anyone knowing.
Spy movies. Bond comes in.
What was the John Wick one when they're walking through like the subway station shooting underneath their arm?
And
And they're like, there's like hundreds of people, and I'm like, you would be in an instant, you'd be able to tell someone's shooting a gun. Like, I don't care what kind. If you had a BB gun, you could tell. And people are just walking like normal.
Yeah.
Even like the sound of a bullet traveling by you, like it's very loud.
There's a crack with it too.
Yeah.
Unless you get subsonic.
Yeah, unless you get subsonic, but you still hear the action of the pistol.
Yeah.
So
subsonic though is very quiet.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I just like that's where I'm talking about education too. Like not only safety education, that should definitely be pushed. I think before I think even like people who don't want red flag laws and don't want all these other whatever laws they are, whatever gun control laws, I think that those people should be the biggest advocates for safety. And I'm massive on safety. We've shot before. I think you guys and Scotty, like everyone does a good job. Michael, I know, is very safe, and it's educating people, educating kids and stuff like that. I think that's obviously number one. And then also education on the history of weapons, why these laws are even there, and like stuff like that too, because the common people, like, they don't have a clue.
Yeah. And the gun community is by far like the most safe with firearms and safety oriented of anyone in the US, and people don't realize that. And then it's also like the hunting community is the most like conservationist community out there, and they support conservation more than any other industry in the US, but people just don't know anything about that type of stuff. They don't know about either of those markets if they don't hunt or shoot.
Yeah, did you ever hear, Matthew, about the was it a law put in by Teddy Roosevelt that like every rifle or ammo sold has like a tax on it, and that tax goes to conservation?
Any rifle, ammo, hunting tags, I believe fishing as well. Anything that has to do with hunting, like hunting gear, anything in the hunting industry goes, not all of it, but a percentage goes back into conservation. So the hunting community is the largest supporter of conservation, but like your conservationists that hate hunters because they don't believe it's ethical.
They don't know that.
Yeah.
But they're living in a house that was developed by leveling half the rainforest. Wow.
So wait, Darren. So I wanted to get into a little bit of what we were talking about in our men's group the other day too with Darren, and just a little bit about the laws and how it matches up with what we believe in, like Christianity and stuff like that, and just kind of bring up that conversation that you and I had.
The general discussion that we were having was pretty much in the Bible, Romans chapter 13, a letter that Paul wrote to the Romans of that time. I was specifically highlighting on that beginning of that chapter, it's verses 1 through 7. And it pretty much goes to say that a Roman Christian should be abiding by the laws set by their government or by their leaders, because their leaders are appointed by God himself. And, obviously that's been warped and twisted throughout history by kings and queens. And the authority comes from God, so you have to do what we say or we'll kill you. And they did slaughter thousands, like you said. But just the general idea of what I was saying, I did highlight this earlier, is that if it's a law, as a Christian, it's tough to not abide by the law.
Yeah. And I think that's like a good thing to think about too, is that and me and Michael have talked a lot about this type of stuff too, is I would like to get your opinion on it in a second, Matthew, but there's a point where if we don't like something in society, I think as like Christian and believers and stuff like that, we have an obligation to make ourselves known, to try and make the world we live in a better place. And if that means contacting who we need to contact in government, or going to be part of the school system, I think that being part of that stuff and fighting back in the correct way is a good thing. But I think there becomes a line where, I hate to say this, but there's a line somewhere, and I don't know what that line is, where you might be being too much of a rebel. And when you get to be too much of a rebel, I think that could be unbiblical. And I think I don't know where that line is. Don't ask me where that line is. But from what I've read, and because we talked extensively about like Romans chapter 13 and stuff like that, and I watched like a sermon on it and I listened to a couple people speak about it. And that's kind of what I took away from it. Like there's a point where, you should be abiding by the rules and be a good citizen of the country that you live in.
Not a troublemaker.
Yeah.
And, whether or not it's even calling them out and reminding them of where their authority came from.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to bring up off of what you were saying from the conversation that we had about this. So in my perspective, the way that I see it is you shouldn't ever get it to the point where there's like complete anarchy. And I think that God told us, in those verses and to the Romans, like told us that information because he knows in complete and utter anarchy, it's just a failed society and just no one is going to prosper from that.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably where the line is, like to kind of not even obey, but kind of just abide by your government. Obviously, they should have what's best in mind for the people of the country. And I think that's really just that line in the sand of like,
well, go ahead.
Just the line is right there. Complete anarchy. That's where
Yeah.
you need to prevent your country from being just that.
Definitely. And to keep the decently moral leaders in check,
And one of the interesting things that I heard is one of the people that I was listening to, he was talking about like, is it good for like people like us to be in government and stuff like that? He's like, yeah, it's a great thing. But he goes, we're not trying to make government the church. He's like, there's a separation there, and it's good to have that separation, but he goes, we're not supposed to as Christians like go into the government trying to make the government into the church. So trying not to litigate like everyone has to read the Bible type, stuff like that.
Well, another thing he brought up was even like in, I believe, England,
Mm-hmm.
like their church service is regulated by the government.
Oh, really?
So yeah, if they wanted to change the time that they have church, they have to go to Parliament and get Parliament to pass a law to have, instead of 9:30, they want to move it to 10. No, you can't do that. It's 9:30.
Really?
For
By
all
the government,
churches?
yeah, by the government, by law, yeah.
Wow, I did not know
I'm
that.
gonna call Parliament and get them to vote on it and have it pass.
So you
Well,
can't have a different type of. I wonder if does that affect
don't
like
know,
different
yeah.
religions? Like, can a mosque have a service at a different time?
Well, if it's not, I don't know.
I think, but
Speculate on it. You can get, yeah.
I think that's a good example though of how like people maybe with good intentions have meshed government and church when they're supposed to be two different things. You know, but anyways, the thing I want to ask you, Matthew, is for you, like, do you have a line where you think that questioning laws or pushing laws, do you think there's a line where it's like, okay, like I need to back off a little bit, or as a people, as a country, as a society, we just need to back off at all? Or do you think it's just push?
What do you mean by like pushing for laws, like pushing against laws?
I mean, like push back on the
Yeah,
government. right?
pushing back on the government, pushing back on people. Like, have you ever thought about
for
that?
like if there's like something like the ATF brace comes out and people don't like it, or
Yeah, or just
Or even like a vaccine. If
or a
the
vaccine.
government says
oh, you mean like it gets passed through and we shouldn't accept it,
just,
or
you know, something that you just might disagree with or whatever.
the idea is that I think that almost all law that gets passed through the government is almost always a majority. Like most time people want these things. Like they push their representatives to get these things out. The representatives are representing the people. I don't think that representatives typically have like a massive say and we're going to pass random laws that only 10% of America likes. I think generally most of America will like these laws. I think there are some issues whenever it gets to like, if there's this big federal law, like that kind of like maybe only like specific like cities or people like within certain areas like, and it kind of like disparages you. But for the most part, I think that most laws that get passed through are majority voted in. It's not like I think that most of the time it's pushing back against the law. I guess can be good sometimes, but it's I don't know. Most time it's democratic to begin with. I don't know.
I think for the most part, a little bit.
But it depends. Like it's very difficult to answer that question because unless I'm looking at the law you're saying that you don't like, I can't give you a reason. Because if they pass a law randomly, like 60% of people say like we just want to completely get rid of the Bill of Rights, I'd be like, okay, that's a little bit crazy. But for the most part, like most laws I see,
That's getting pretty close to that anarchy line.
Yeah.
yeah, like that's I don't know. I haven't seen any laws at least that are like completely like terrible. For the most part, they always have a reasoning behind
Have
them.
you never looked up the crazy law list?
Yeah, there's like random laws, but those are like state laws.
Yeah, like, you know, you can beat your wife on the steps of the whatever it is.
I bet you
the
that's,
Capitol or
that's
something
probably
like
in the
that.
books, but I don't think that anybody's ever gotten away with that. I imagine if somebody did that, they'd be like, "Yeah, you're probably gonna move up the course."
I'll tell you who.
assault. It's assault.
I'll tell you who got away with that. Whoever the governor was at the time. Beating
Yeah,
his
well, that's
wife.
the only reason why those exist. Like, no, you're allowed to beat your wife on these steps if it's Wednesday afternoon. Obvious. You guys didn't know that?
Yeah, there's another one like
Put it out, Henry.
Yeah.
you can't-
Read the code. Oh, this is a new one. Fresh ink. Still drying. Put it in the newspaper.
there's one that was like you can't have a donkey in a bathtub and like, you know,
You can't put a pie on your windowsill.
yeah.
But, oh man, it might have been Tim Pool I was listening to, but he like broke down why that law existed. And I think it was like the pie on the windowsill was something because like it was like there was like some predator population, like bears or something, whatever, and it was like attracting like these like predators into town. So like, okay, you can't do that anymore because like they can, I don't know, just like sounds so silly, but back in the day it actually made some sort of
There
sense.
was a I'm pretty sure it was a town in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken. That
We don't like Georgia. We can skip that topic.
well, it was a town. I think it might have been Tennessee or something like that. But it was a town that like made every single male, ages like 15 to like 45, purchase a firearm, and
Really?
that law is like still in effect. but it's like at some point in time they made all the males
What if you're
have
a felon?
firearms.
Switzerland have that?
I don't know.
So Switzerland, Switzerland has mandatory service.
Mm-hmm.
It's mandatory, but if you're like, from my understanding, because I have some friends that are from Switzerland, if you're like in college, or like if you say like, hey, I'm going to medical school, like I'm going to be a doctor, like there's ways kind of out of it, but typically it is like mandatory service, and you bring your service rifle home with you. So I have a friend in Switzerland. He has his grandfather's service rifle, his father's service rifle, and his service rifle. And I think it's sick that you get to keep your
That
service
is
rifle.
freaking cool.
But that just shows like every single house in Switzerland has,
At
most
least
likely has
two.
at least one military service rifle in
Yeah.
the house.
There's like weird stuff with that though, because like they have the rifles, but then there's certain rules in certain areas where they're like you have to keep the ammo all at the police station, so you just have the gun but no ammo. And there's
Yeah.
like I guess I hate this because when Switzerland are all like we have more gun rights than Americans, but there's like stupid laws like that that are like
No, I would not say
Really?
that they have more gun rights than us, but
yeah.
they
Here's your
do get to have military
bullet.
service rifles
Yeah, one
in
bullet.
their house. You just can't have it. You might not be able to have any ammo for it.
Yeah, no, there's I don't know if that's exactly true. That's what I've heard. I don't know the laws of Switzerland, but
So Switzerland's just Barney Fife in it. Unloaded pistols everywhere. Ooh, scary.
I'm sure it probably has to do with like if you're in the city or not.
yeah.
People, because even
It'd be a lot easier to hand out ammo than it would be to hand out rifles.
I believe in Australia, you can still have firearms, but it has to be like only like hunting rifles, and it has to be like super regulated, and you have to live out because Australia is like all country. The only like cities are right on the very border, and it's all like ranches. Like the largest ranch in the world is in Australia.
Oh, they're
So it's
huge.
all like ranchers, and they'll use them for, wild dogs that they have, and
crocodiles.
kangaroos and stuff like that.
Kangaroos are vicious. All right. So next, I think that we kind of glossed over that pretty good.
Who's buzzing in over there?
That was me, and Caleb was in here. So I don't know who's in here anymore. But I told him just like if anyone has any comments or questions, please put them in the chat. The next thing I want to get into is the health stuff, and so that was I can pull it up on the Discord right now, just so that
Can
we
you show
have.
it like on the screen too? Or?
Yeah, I can.
It was like a shitty screenshot. You only took like half of it.
Well, I thought you'd look it up.
I
Hold on.
You did?
Darren, do you still have
have
that
it right
link?
now,
Do
yeah,
you have that
right
link?
now.
Hey, share that link right into the podcast tab, and I'll click on it and I'll pull it up for everybody.
Okay. Oh, give me a second.
At least so I can just click on the picture.
New government-funded Lucky Charms. Better than ground beef.
Yeah, that one.
Delicious.
Sounds right.
Let me figure out how to...
So basically, to wrap up that topic, we should abolish the ATF.
We're all in agreement here.
Abolish the ATF. Unlimited firearms for everyone. You can have fully auto
General
tanks.
discussion,
Anything you
Dallas.
want.
Well, and like here's my thing too, and I know
General discussion, I got it in there for
okay.
you.
My other thing, and this is just kind of
Oh, wrong tab.
Uh-oh. Pulls it up on screen. We're all like,
Yay!
we just make sure that on the live stream the view is coming out correct.
Yeah, give me a second.
So just my kind of final thoughts on that. I'll let both you guys say your final thoughts on the last topic. I think that if there are any gun laws to be made, I think that
Great.
perfect. I think that the amendment should be amended first. Like if you're gonna do anything, like people can't have tanks or machine guns or mortar shells or mortars, artillery or something like that. If you're going to write that, then just go and put it in the amendment. I think we would all agree that you're not allowed to have a nuclear weapon as a citizen. That's fine. But amend the Constitution rather than just making laws and ATFs and even like the ATF rulings. I don't know if we really got into this part too much, but even the rulings like on the brace, it's and bump stocks and stuff like that. It's like they're reinterpreting different things. Like they're things that already been solid in the past, like the brace thing. Like the companies making braces went to the ATF and said like, hey, is this fine? It helps out, this type of people, disabled veterans, blah, 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 blah. And then the ATF was like, no, now that's not okay. And so it's just like, they're just reinterpreting stuff instead of like, hey, this is the law. And if we want to change it, we have to go through Congress and stuff like that. So my thing, and I was telling Darren about this, like I would be fine with the brace thing if like Congress voted on the brace thing and said, hey, this is fine. And then 3 years later, Congress came back and said, hey, we need to relook at this and either amend this law or fix this law or whatever. But that's not what happened. It's just the ATF is like, oh, we changed our mind on that. And I think it's not necessarily just the brace for me. It's the way of going about it, because it's like, if they can do that, can they just change their mind on, hey, semi-automatic firearms are technically almost automatic, so we're reinterpreting that to mean, I don't think that would necessarily happen, but we're going to reinterpret that.
Did a test trial to see how well it goes over for them.
Yeah. Anyways, closing thoughts on that whole thing. If you guys want to go, shoot, and then we'll get into the next little topic.
You guys are looking at me. No, I mean, to amend the Second Amendment, we'd have like a huge Bill of Rights. I think that the way it is right now, and a lot of people say, like, they make the argument that like we can't make any gun laws because the Second Amendment says this, but I think the idea is, if the ATF is going to make any ridiculous, like, over the top laws, then I think that we should, like, I think there's probably going to be something in place or something that we're going to push for. There's going to be a large, like, uproar from America. But for now, I think that the system isn't, like, necessarily flawed. I guess they can interpret things in weird ways, and the ATF brace isn't really what is popular, I think most people will probably agree with it because they just don't know. But, I mean, the Second Amendment isn't really, it's just written words. Like, I think the way we interpret it matters more than actually what's written in it.
I think the written words are more important than how we interpret things, because the way we interpret things can change.
No, because, like, you know what country had the most written rights out of any country in the entire world in history?
Which one?
USSR. They had workers' rights. They had rights of the individual. They had all these rights, but nobody cared about them. Like, they weren't interpreted that way. The law is kind of like, the way they were interpreted was that, like, they went through and they were like, all right, well, we can just make all these things because this thing we can interpret like this. We can interpret this like this. Like, they went through and they just basically, nobody had any rights and everyone, like, kind of lived, like, super shitty. The idea is, like, the written law, I don't think that really matters as much as how we interpret it. And I think you're right with, like, the interpretation. Like, if the ATF can interpret this however they want, if they're interpreting it in bad ways, and I think that's where the issue lies, whereas just how it's written.
I think the interpretation part is you're passing on to subjectiveness. You're using subjective things instead of, this is what we wrote, this is the rule, follow it.
I think with that, I think it's more. I think that what you just said kind of proves the point that the written law is more important, because they wrote them so vaguely that they were able to interpret them in a bad way. Because think of, like, legal documents. People spend so much money to get people to write these things so specifically that there is no way that you can get a loophole out of it. So, like, obviously the Second Amendment was written a long time ago in a very kind of different language, that it's like, people see it as interpretable and not really as, like,
Dry cut. That's the way it is.
yeah, because it's written in such a different, terminology.
One thing that, and I'll let you say your last thing, then we'll move on. There is a guy that I've listened to before in the past, super intelligent guy, and he breaks down every single word of the Second Amendment. Like, this is what this word meant at this time, and he breaks it all down. And it's probably one of the most, like, beautiful things. Made me appreciate the writing back in the day way more. But yeah, I can share it to you guys. You guys can listen to it later on. But go ahead and say what you wanted to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like everything we read has an interpretation to it. I think because the idea is we can read the Second Amendment, say the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, but we obviously infringe on that. So I think that I think that it's more than just like we can write it in ways where we'd be like, you can't do anything. We can't make any laws on this whatsoever. But then they're like, well, we can make laws on this, but then we can make laws on this. And like, I think there's always going to be some interpretation there. And I think that the best thing to kind of push for is like they kind of fight the interpretation of it rather than like, well, the law says this. And if you don't follow this reading of it, then you're wrong. I don't know. I think in a way, yeah, maybe that we could put some more rights on like or more restrictions on the ATF and how they interpret it. I don't really know exactly what their interpretation is or what their actual like the rules against how they interpret things is, but there's more than just what's written down. Like it's not just like the written things are the written things, and there's only one interpretation. I think there's so many interpretations to anything you write.
Well, I think I'll say this, then we'll be done. But
Okay.
that's what we got.
We're gonna
that's
go
what we
on
have the
this forever.
Supreme Court for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, things will be worked out. Anyways, so I came across this. I'd heard a lot about this, and it was a study that came out, and it was just very simple, very basic, and it just came out with a bunch of different foods that should be encouraged, should be moderated, and should be minimized. And if you look at the list, and I'll kind of go down on the top of the list, and so the green is, you know, these foods should be encouraged. The orange or the yellow is these foods should be moderated, and the red is you should minimize these foods in your diet. So from top down to bottom, it's watermelon, kale, frosted mini wheats, unsweetened almond milk, non-fat frozen yogurt, chocolate-covered almonds, orange juice with calcium, honey nut Cheerios, dates, sweet potato chips, millet, I don't know what that is, egg fried in vegetable oil, skinless chicken breast,
Egg substitute.
substitute,
Skinless chicken breast is better than chips.
worse.
Oh yeah.
Worse. Skinless chicken breast, Lucky Charms, whole wheat bread, canned pineapple and heavy syrup, boiled or poached egg, whole milk, almond M&Ms, non-fat mozzarella cheese, and listen to this, ice cream cone with nuts. That's the last thing that you should moderate. Now, here's the things that you should minimize in your diet. And again, remember, the last one I just said was ice cream cone with nuts. Under that, and the only three red, is whole egg fried in butter, cheddar cheese, and ground beef at the very bottom. I heard that, and I read that, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Now, I understand there's Joe Rogan and some other people said, like, oh, you know, this food pyramid crap pushed by the government sucks, blah, blah. And there's articles that came out like, this wasn't, you know, the government uses my plate, not the food pyramid anymore. The food pyramid has got done away with. And this study wasn't, you know, published by the government, blah, blah, blah. But it's to me, it's the same concept. It's like these BS food policies, things that are being pushed that literally make zero sense if you know anything about diet and exercise and stuff like that.
It was still funded by the government though. They spent like
Whoa,
don't check me on the number.
Yeah.
But
If you have it pulled up,
3
and you
years of time and millions of taxpayers' dollars
went into
to do
this.
into this
Research?
nonsense. Yeah.
Holy crap!
You want to know one of the things I pick up first on this, aside from like the ratings on everything? Why? Okay, so we have, let's just see, like watermelon, kale, dates, stuff like that, just generic things, whole wheat bread. Why is it a name brand of like Lucky Charms? Why is that the name brand almond M&Ms? Why not like chocolate candy?
Oh yeah, very good
very
point.
specific.
It's literally
yeah.
pushing
Brands.
like frosted mini wheats.
That's a brand.
That's a
itself.
brand. That's not a cereal. That's a brand of like a branded name
Yeah,
of
that's
cereal.
not like frosted wheat cereal.
No.
Hun-
And if you look, so honey nut Cheerios, like all, I don't know why, and there's so many cereals in here. Why is there so much cereal?
Because it's good for your heart.
Yeah. And then even to have watermelon at the top. Isn't watermelon like the least densely fiber dense, one of the least fiber dense
Fruits.
and tons of sugar.
And it's pretty much then water.
Yeah, it's like sugar water
Yeah.
because there's no fiber in it. And that's where you get the nutrients out of your fruit, from my understanding, is out of the fiber. Like
Yeah,
more
you get a little bit of energy from the sugar, but
Yeah, but obviously if you eat a whole ton of watermelon, you'd get way too much sugar intake without any benefit.
Yeah. So my biggest thing with this whole thing is I don't understand. Like, anybody, you don't have to know anything about diets or anything like that. And when I see ice cream cone beating out meat, like beef, that just blows my mind. Because no one thinks ice cream cones are like, they're supposed to be like a dessert, something you have every once in a while. Like, everyone who knows anything about food knows that.
Yeah.
But this says otherwise, and that just blew my mind.
So what are you trying to say? Like, are you trying to say that, like, what's your deeper point here?
My deeper point is that Kellogg's paid off whoever the hell freaking made this study.
Well,
and
who
put
owns
Not only
Kellogg's?
that, not only that,
Koch
but
brothers.
this isn't
Who
helping
owns
the
Koch brothers?
Who?
Man, the name's slipping my mind right now. But the company BlackRock,
Really?
Vanguard, they own the entire food industry. All processed food, I'm pretty sure, is owned by BlackRock. They're at least majority shareholder of it all.
Really?
Yeah. Have you looked
Yeah.
into BlackRock
Yeah, I
and
have.
Vanguard?
Yeah, they own a lot of the different companies, but the idea is that they, the way they split it up, it doesn't actually cause any like competitive issues within the market. I don't believe. Like, because the idea is they may own these companies.
Well, yeah,
but they still-
I mean, if you have a monopoly on it, then it doesn't matter if your own companies are competing with each other. If they're all making money, like, yeah, sure, let Kellogg take over the market for a little bit, and then let the other cereal company like, you're winning both ways.
I guess what I'm trying to get to the point of is like, are you saying?
The big problem I have with this isn't helping the problem, which is obesity.
Yeah.
Chocolate almonds are not going to make you lose more weight than eating just beef or steak or eggs.
Yeah.
Boiled eggs.
Okay,
It's not going to help you.
I'm kind of farming quotes from you guys is what I'm doing. But the idea is that did anybody kind of like read the study or see what it was about?
Yeah, I did.
What was it about?
It was a long time ago when I first heard this.
Did you read that study, the one that actually links to right here, though?
Which one?
This
Like
this is the study.
Yeah. We can click on the study. We can go to it. And they had their list of how they organized everything, and I read it, and it all made perfectly good sense. I usually scroll down to the conclusion at the very end, and I read that. And I'm not going to read the conclusion. Anyone else can go and read it if they want. But here's my biggest thing, and this is the main reason why I wanted to bring this up. The main reason why I wanted to bring this up is not necessarily because I think the study itself is wrong. I think that, BlackRock is controlling everything or anything like that. My biggest point to this whole part is the food, the way diet has been dealt with in the country as a whole has just been wrong for so long. And with the country's obesity levels going in the straight up direction, obviously everything that's been done or said isn't working. And so I think that the whole diet thing needs to just have a massive overhaul on it, and it needs to be re-looked at.
71.6%
Okay.
are obese or overweight.
Of Americans?
Yes.
I'll kind of break down the study. The study is meant to show the limitations of the food pyramid. The goal of what they were showing there was that they're saying the food pyramid doesn't make any sense, is what they're saying. And I think what they're trying to get at is that there's no way to write a perfect food pyramid, and that's what they're trying to say here. They're not trying to say that's like a perfect way of it. They're trying to show like this is wrong, but we made this based off nutritional, like our own like study based off nutritional values and nutritional things. The idea is they're saying that. Like, and that's the reason why I hate this article is because they're saying these people, like they pull this picture up and they're saying like these people in this study are saying this is like a perfect way of how you should interpret your diet, but they aren't. These people in the study are saying the food pyramid can't be written perfectly and that there's always going to be limitations of it. Just like looking at like a 2D map. If you look at a 2D map, there's always going to be problems with it no matter how you draw it because there's certain things that like you can't have.
Put it into 2D.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. But okay.
But they're not saying that this is like something that you should like follow for your diet. They're saying that this is an issue that like that's the whole point. It's showing the limitations.
Okay, so what's the point? Because and here's my thing: to the common person, when they go out and they look at stuff, right? The average person that's not Matthew and isn't going to go to the study and read the entire thing.
But the thing's only like 5 pages, and it tells you exactly what they think.
Yeah,
No.
but you couldn't get
the
80% of the population to read the study, they'd look at that one picture,
and
that's
they'd
it.
go,
But that's not the
And
point.
that's even if they ever take the time to look at the picture.
But do you think that's okay to go and read this article right here, get like false information, then go and tell everyone, hey, this is what the government thinks that we should eat?
no.
I think with that image coming out, with those different foods ranked the way they are, I think it's, I don't know.
Well,
I would say that these people are spreading misinformation is what I'm trying to say.
Wait, no. What I'm saying is take the words, take the article out of it. What is the graph telling you?
The graph is full of shit.
Okay,
Basically, like that's the point, is to show like even though they did it based off like a perfect nutrition levels, the graph doesn't make any sense, and that's the point.
yeah, okay, that's the point. And again, to my larger point of the whole thing is the entire food dietary guidelines that the government that's been being pushed, none of it is working right. And when you see this, I'm not saying the people who made this study, they suck, blah, 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 whatever. What I'm saying is, if this is what the food pyramid is pretty much telling us, or what it was telling us all the way up until 2011, and even My Plate, I went and read a bunch of the My Plate stuff too. None of it really helps you out in any sort of way. And I think this partially ties into like the COVID stuff and health and all, like in
I don't
general.
think it does at all. I think it absolutely doesn't.
You
Just
don't
scroll down to the bottom.
you don't think that health in general ties into COVID at all?
That's not what I said at all. What I'm saying
That's
is
what
this
just came out of my mouth.
The food pyramid specifically is a very interesting thing. So so he says right there in 1980 that obesity started going up, and he's saying that because they implemented all these programs, like they're not helping, and that the obesity is just rising on its own. But the idea is these programs may be helping, they may not be. The idea is that obesity in general is going up, and we need to push some sort of some sort of thing so we can show kids, hey, this is how you have a healthy diet, because right now heart disease is like the biggest killer of anybody in like the U.S. So the idea is
Actually, no, that's not true for young people or people with moderate age now. Suicide.
suicide.
I'm pretty.
I mean, like overall death is what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. Oh, no, I'm pretty sure suicide is number one now.
I
For-
really doubt that.
You can
From
look.
like certain age groups, maybe.
I think it's 18 to like 45.
Okay, but I mean like overall, because the idea is like but the idea is, what I'm trying to say is this article is extremely misleading. They're taking I think that right now, if I went and I took this podcast and I got a video of Michael saying that like assault rifles, or like in like whenever people go and use assault rifles, they're not as lethal, whatever. I can probably take that, make a whole article about it, and say like Michael's this terrible guy. But the idea is I'd be completely misrepresenting what Michael's saying.
Yeah.
But the idea is that just like I would be doing that, this article is doing that with these guys. These guys are saying, hey, the food pyramid has limitations, and there's no real good way to do it.
All right. How about this? How about you go to the exact data, whatever the study was. What?
What do you mean go to the study
Do you have the study pulled up yourself?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I was gonna say go to the study and just read us the conclusion.
Well, it's not just about the conclusion.
I'm reading the
itself.
whole thing right now.
Oh, Darren will fill us in.
Yeah. No, but the idea is like, all right, so the food pyramid was released in like 1992. Do you know when the first issues came up about it, when people started like saying like, hey, this is bad, we should probably take this out and revise it?
Yeah. When?
1992. The same year. They said like, as soon as it was released, people came out and they were like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. If I base my diet off of this, we're going to have problems.
Okay. Now here's my issue with that. Okay. I'm not saying you're wrong, but when I got into school and, through the early 2000s, I was still being taught the food pyramid. That's my issue.
The idea is that
And there was no like, hey, did you guys know that this was actually questioned the year that it was made? No, it was still just taught ad nauseum that, hey, this is how you should eat. This is how you should structure your diet.
I'm sure it wasn't even common knowledge that people questioned it right away.
I think that the point of the food pyramid, though, wasn't like make your whole diet based off this pyramid. I think the idea was that when you read that as a kid, you see that and you're like, oh, I'm supposed to eat more vegetables, or I'm supposed to eat more of this. The idea is that we should see the
No,
effects
that's not. Do you know what's at the bottom of the food pyramid?
like bread or something.
Bread.
Yeah, but the idea is we're just trying to make it so that kids can eat healthier. And the goal of the food pyramid in general is not to like do all these. It's mainly just to say like basic, broad, general things like we should eat less processed food, or we should eat less. Like there's these general things, but the idea is like we can't make a perfect diet for every single person based off one little tiny picture.
Well, so why doesn't the government release a government-funded study saying, hey, eat less processed food. Because everyone knows that's the most common knowledge thing that anyone should
Yeah,
know.
I think that's very true. But how do you tell that to a kid? How do you show a kid? Like the idea is like,
Well, you don't need to teach a kid. You teach
Well,
the adult that's buying the food for them and the adults that are
Well, if they're-
preparing it in the school districts and stuff.
if you're a kid in school and you're going through the lunch line, your parents aren't choosing the food that you're buying. You're seeing all this different food and you're buying it. Like you'd have kids at the end of the lunch line that'd always be like getting like 3 cookies and then like no food. And then
But
they
if
just eat the
all
cookies.
their options were whole foods, then what are they going to pick? The least best option? If they're all good options, they just pick one.
Yeah, I think we're all backwards on this.
okay, what? Hit us with it. Hey, Mike, you're speaking in the mic.
Nonetheless, we
No,
propose,
directly into the mic.
Yeah, nonetheless, we propose that its overall algorithm and structure needs to be redesigned. So they're saying the same thing.
Yeah, so
They're saying
they,
this is all hogwash.
yeah, the way the food pyramid is set up.
Yeah,
is,
but they're saying they put this in there to show how absurd the food pyramid is.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's right.
And so
People are using this sheet saying that this study was hogwash when they're just saying we only put this here to show you that our food pyramid is hogwash.
Yeah.
What do you say?
Wait, so this is it? Are you saying that they're not saying that this is truth?
No, they're not saying this is truth.
no. What they're saying, I get the whole gist of it now, and this is the point where you really do get to look into stuff. Matthew looks into stuff and corrects me on it. I appreciate that. Darren looks into stuff, corrects me on it. What I guess what the study is saying. Correct me if I'm wrong, both of you. What they're saying is we look at the food pyramid. The food pyramid tells you to increase these certain things and decrease these certain things. And when we reevaluated that, it doesn't work. So when you look at the graphic, right, the graphic that's out there, what the graphic is showing is what the food pyramid is pushing. And I know
You're saying that the graphic is a representation of
the food
our.
It's not. It's not the actual. It's the idea is they had an idea of what, like, based off their algorithms, what nutrition. Like, if they had like all these different like specific things the foods are made out of, they're like, okay, let's make a perfect diet with all these different things balanced perfectly to make like a really like healthy human being. And then they had that all that data and like, all right, sweet, we made the perfect meal. Now let's see what foods it's pointing to. And it was like pointed to those foods, and they're like,
They
holy
used
shit, if someone eats this shit, they die. You know,
they
like,
used what the food pyramid says is okay and create an
So
algorithm.
they're criticizing
created
the
this.
food
Yeah,
pyramid,
Yes, yes.
and they're not agreeing that that's
No.
what you should eat.
No.
yeah, they're saying like all this shit right here, all the algorithms that they made is like it's dog shit.
Yeah, and so that again goes on. What my framing and my looking at the study was off, but the same general thing that I'm saying is still true. Is the diet in the country, the things that are being pushed, aren't correct, and they need to be totally overhauled. That's my biggest point.
Yeah,
of
I
this
mean,
whole thing.
if you go to other countries, a lot of the food that's in our grocery stores is like illegal and labeled as like toxic in other countries. It's illegal for their version of like USDA will not allow that stuff to hit the shelves.
Okay. My thing is, what do you think is causing obesity? Like from that 1990 thing, what do you think is causing?
What do I think is causing obesity? It's simple: sedentary lives, people not moving, people's diets being absolute crap. They're eating garbage, and I think the biggest thing is advertising and marketing and stuff like that. So those two things, and then people's calorie count is just going through the roof because of the crappy food. I think when you get down to brass tacks, the processed food and stuff like that, that plays a part. And I don't think and I've looked into this extensively, I think we don't necessarily know exactly what the processed part of all the food is necessarily doing to us. We know that testosterone levels and stuff like that are all coming down, and we're seeing like effects right now, but we don't know general straight objective causes, and A is affecting B and C. But for the most part, it's the lifestyle and the choices of diet and just what people are eating and how much they're eating. And I think that the government has just done an awful job. I could really kind of care less if the government does a good job or not. Like, I know what I put in my mouth, and for the most part, and I look into all the studies and I listen to debates and stuff like that on different diets being used and what's healthy and what's not healthy. But the average person, the regular people out there, aren't doing that. And then my biggest thing with this is who, like, does anyone know the most obese people in the country as far as socioeconomic status?
Oh, poverty, poor people.
Poor people are fat, and like that doesn't make any. That hasn't been true
At any other
at
point
any
in
other
history.
point in history, and that's my biggest thing.
So, one of the biggest things, and this is actually something that might be pretty cool, something that you guys might agree with. Everyone who's like really far on the left, they'll go say shit about Europe. Like Europeans, they don't have this problem. They never have this issue. There are a lot of really fat Europeans. Like obesity in every single country has got up, and
It's gone up.
yeah, it's gone up. Yeah,
India and stuff. I was just watching a documentary on India too, talking about that.
The idea is that, and the only reason we can point to is food and activity. And I think a lot of it has to do with activity. I think quite a bit of it has to do with food as well, because we have all these like massive fatty foods now. But I think the idea is that when it comes to the food pyramid, if we're going back to that, I don't think that the food pyramid being put in has caused like obesity or anything. I think that they're trying their best to make some sort of graphics so they can show kids, hey, eat like healthier. Look at this little method right here. You want to eat food that are maybe less processed, less this, less that. But like, I think that to find another like thing that you could just show kids to make them eat healthier, I think it's going to be like problematic.
I wouldn't say that the government is doing a bad job in general, though. Not to go against what you're saying, though, Dallas, but because I remember in like 7th, 8th grade, we had all this great food at the cafeteria. And then I believe Michelle Obama put in some kind of food act or
Yeah, that
something
was
for
stupid.
schools.
That was
It was
so
garbage.
bad.
And then they took away all the delicious tasting food, and we had like wheat bread and like all this like healthier food, but we didn't like it.
Yeah, and you know what kids
But-
did? They went and bought cookies.
Well, yeah, exactly. Exactly. But they tried. But I think where it becomes deceiving is like it's the FDA,
Yeah.
right? If they're letting these things slide and hit the shelves, then pretty much they just gave it a green flag and okay, well, it's safe to eat, but it's not.
I think where this came from, you're talking about the 80s when it really started to spike. I think Dallas hit a nail on the head when it comes to marketing. So marketing like all these sugary cereals with cartoon mascots on Saturday morning during cartoons. Like the kid sees that in the store with his favorite cartoon character on it. That's what it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
Coming from someone who's been grocery shopping with kids, if it has their cartoon character
Mickey
on it,
Mouse juice box.
like
Yeah.
that's what they want.
Yeah.
So that has a big thing, and I think it is a lot less of
Sedentary lifestyle.
sedentary lifestyle than it is just horrible processed foods with like, because what was it, even like trans fats, haven't they been kind of outlawed since
Yeah.
then? But those were huge. And then just you look at anything, you look at the calories and like the fats and sugars and stuff on anything, and it's like you look at like a can of soda and it's like, this is 50% of my sugar for the day.
Have you ever read the Coca-Cola can breakdown? You never. I'll pull that up because it's super interesting. But the other thing too is, someone else say something. I'm gonna try and get what I was gonna bring back. It was really good.
I can just continue on what I was saying, and it's just I don't know. I think the food industry is definitely like our demise in that department.
With like the marketing and stuff like that too. I think it's people like these companies pay massive amounts of money just to have their stuff on certain levels of shelf. And I think big money also plays a part, big corporate money and stuff like that, and pushing certain things and egg industry. I would say the same thing. Like, I'm not just trying, because I'm like lower your sugar, eat less carbs, and eat more meat type of guy. And on both sides of the equation, on the milk and eggs side of the equation and on the sugar, Kellogg's and stuff like that side of the equation, both of those companies, they pay for studies. Like, that is just a known thing. Like, they each pay for studies, and nobody wants their study to come out making their company or their area in the food marketplace look bad. And I think that's just a huge problem. And I don't know how you really get around that, because that's always going to be there.
You know what you could do?
What?
Any food industry company cannot be a publicly traded company.
Ooh.
I think that would be a decent start.
Darren, will you pull? You had a great voice in lesson. Will you pull this up and read this for us? You did a good job
Where'd you
last time.
find it?
Just type in a can of what happens 1 hour after drinking a can of Coke, and just go to the image because it's super blurry on my screen. I can't even read it. And in the meantime, I'll
Well, go back to that where you just had it.
this one or the my plate.
No, the thing you just had of the can of Coke.
This
If
one.
it's blurry on your screen, you can. Is that the actual website there?
Yeah, I went to the website and I just clicked on the picture to make it big
Okay.
so everyone.
And
You could maybe control scroll, but that might not work.
in the first 10 minutes,
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, read us out. Just quick. First 10 minutes, just hit it up because this is super interesting. This blew my mind the first time I saw it.
10 teaspoons of sugar hit your system, 100% of your recommended daily intake. You don't immediately vomit from the overwhelming sweetness because phosphoric acid cuts the flavor, allowing you to keep it down. 2, 20 minutes in, your blood sugar spikes, causing an insulin burst. Your liver responds to this by turning any sugar it can get its hands into fat. There's plenty of that at this particular moment. 40 minutes in, the caffeine absorption. Dang, it just went away on me. Oh, look, I can edit it and everything.
During this little break, I've actually done work at a Coca-Cola factory before. Every product that they use to make Coke comes in with skull and crossbones on it.
Really?
They're like, if you were to try a sip of that, you'd die. It's deadly. But because this cancels out a little bit of that, like it's just all trash chemicals that they put in there. And like where it drips on the floor, on the concrete floor, it burns holes through the damn floor.
And that goes into making Coke.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I don't like that analogy because I don't like that like framing because like Splenda, the stuff you put in coffee, if that's like one tiny thing off, it's like extremely deadly. It can kill like everybody in the room.
You
know?
definitely shouldn't eat it, though.
Yeah, but the idea is like when we mix these things together and it creates a final product, I don't think that we should like evaluate the raw materials it takes to make it. I think we should just evaluate like, hey, what does this product do to us?
But if you think about it, like if you go and cut a piece of cane sugar off and you take a bite out of it.
Yeah, you're fine.
If you cut a cow in half and you eat it, is that cow,
You should probably cook it a little bit first, sear it on each side. But yeah, that's fine.
Nobody, I think, what Michael just said, I don't think anyone's like, oh, this stuff is toxic. That means it's bad. It's not going to kill us. If it was going to kill somebody, hurt somebody, the FDA would have regulated it already. It wouldn't be a thing. That's understandable. But my thing with stuff like that, and it goes for the same thing for like the processed food type stuff, is when you have all of these chemicals, we don't necessarily know what all these chemicals look like together long term. That's my issue.
We absolutely do. What do you mean?
No, we don't. And I'll say it like this too. We don't, because you can't test for it. And the reason why I say that is, okay, take medication, right? We don't know how every single medication reacts with each other, correct? We know because of when you mix this medication and this medication, we've seen it in people, like you shouldn't take alcohol and sleeping pills. We know that because it's been tested and people have done that before, and we have the data for it. And we can test for it. But if somebody came out with a new drug, right? There's no way that we could test that new drug mixed in with every other drug that's on the market. It's just impossible, and this study really couldn't be done, right? Now we know that this chemical is generally good with this one, and this one's generally good with this one, and we'll go and do animal trials and stuff like that. But long term, with all these different ingredients, is we necessarily don't know the super long-term effects, even if I'm saying that there could be micro little things happening to people, and we don't necessarily know what that looks like until we can look back on all this data as a whole coming in.
How long has Coke been around?
Coke's been around for like 100 years. I just watched a documentary. It was very interesting.
So is that like, are you saying that like we don't understand like how Coke affects people?
No, not Coke. I'm saying all the chemicals that are put into all of our foods and drinks and stuff now, we don't necessarily know what because in 100 years we're going to look back and maybe say like, wow, we really shouldn't have done that. And I'll give you an example. There's been a couple of studies that came out, and they were talking about if you have children block their ears, they're talking about taint sizes in mice. So the distance between the genitals and like the bowel, like in between there. And the reason why they were measuring that is because they noticed with a smaller taint size, it was lower testosterone in mice. And the reasoning behind it was they were putting these mice in with microplastics. So they had plastic, and these mice would ingest microplastics, and over generations of mice, because mice can have like multiple litters per year and you can look at many generations, the testosterone in the mice was dropping because of the microplastics. And that's a new area of study that we're looking into for humans and stuff like that now. But there is no like, right now, like plastic isn't killing anybody. Having your food in plastic, drinking out of plastic, it's not killing you. It's not hurting anybody. But long term, is it affecting your body? Is it affecting, your hormone levels? And because that's the big conversation nowadays in health, is like hormone levels and stuff like that. And so I'm not saying like, oh my gosh, there's toxic stuff being put in our food, it's going to kill you tomorrow, don't eat it. I'm saying like over time, with enough of this XYZ substance in your system, is it going to mess something up? Is there some sort of, because of the obesity rates in the country, is there some sort of processing in the food that is turning off certain hormones, that is making it more difficult for people to lose weight or gain weight, that we don't see the full picture because we don't have enough data and we haven't been able to look into it? So that's one of my big things with all this chemicals and stuff being put into food.
What would be the point of that, though?
Point of what?
Why would they allow that? Just not knowing? Just
not
pure
knowing.
stupidity?
It wouldn't be stupidity, it'd be ignorance.
Ignorance.
It'd just be not knowing it's like, hey, we can put this stuff in food, or we can put this stuff in our food containers or whatever, and it's been tested, it's been approved, it doesn't harm anybody. But over super long term, does it mess with people's hormones a little bit? Does it mess with over the long term, does it mess with there's a word for it. It's like pretty much having children, like our women. Fertility. Yeah. Over a long period of time, because fertility rates are dropping also. Now, obviously, there's many things that can go into this equation, fertility and hormones and all that. But if the question is, are these foods and things we're putting into our bodies having an effect? A lot of people are saying yes, they do, and to the amount of how much we don't really know.
I don't think that because every single time we do any sort of study on like any medicine, food, anything, the idea is that like we're making, based off like the data we have, the best decision that we can make. And the idea is, I don't like the idea that people would come in and say like, there may be just some hidden data here that we don't know about. So should we ban Coke, or should we ban this, or ban?
Okay, here's my biggest thing. This is I think this is the thing that blew my mind the most. 10 tablespoons of sugar hit your system. 100% of your recommended daily intake. That's obviously not healthy. Like everyone knows that you shouldn't be able to drink 100% of your recommended daily sugar, boom, like that, in a 8-ounce can of liquid. That's just generally unhealthy, right? And the fact that this whole thing could be wrong. I'm not saying that this is gospel right here. You definitely have to back check. I read this, thought it was interesting, cool. The fact that they put a chemical in there to make sure you don't vomit, or to make sure you keep down the thing you just drank because it's so sweet, that's an issue to me. Why are, even just in general, why is this even a thing?
Are you getting at, what I think what you're getting at, check me if I'm wrong, is the FDA should be doing a better job of just letting things like this slide on into the shelves.
Yeah. And at least say hey, is there something that can be done about this? Why are you putting a chemical in there that's making you not vomit this up the second you put it in your mouth?
I have an idea.
What?
We should abolish the FDA. But really, they're obviously not doing anything.
But no, right now we're kind of making this issue where it's like, this is something that's hurting us. But in reality, we kind of know what's going on with Coke. We know this isn't something that's causing a massive. You're seeing people drinking Coke and dying the next day.
No, obviously not.
Chemical.
Yeah, but in 30 years.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like Dallas was saying, if you need to put an extra chemical in it to make it so that your body doesn't instantly vomit it out because it knows that it's way too much sugar. Like, do you really need 10 teaspoons then to make it sweet?
Yeah.
Or are you putting that much sugar in it because that much sugar on a daily dose makes something addicting?
And then here's my other thing too, and I'll answer what you just said. It doesn't have to be these people, they drink this stuff and they're dying, right? This is my biggest focus, and let me know if you guys agree with this.
Yeah.
It's not, oh my gosh, people are drinking or eating this stuff and then dying. It's a
Yeah, it's not like the vaccine.
hold on. You're not allowed to say that on YouTube. Watch it. It's not that these people are, oh my gosh, they're eating this and dying. It's the quality of life too. It's like, do we want our people in our country to have the best quality of life at the same time? Because you can drink Coke every single day of your life until you die at age 90. But if you're 400 pounds and Coke was a big part of it, of adding all these extra calories to your diet, your quality of life compared to someone who's happy, healthy, your brain, everything functions better, your body's better, you're less burden on the government and all that as far as money. And I can explain that in a second. But
Well, I mean, to go into it too is, so 45 minutes in, your body ups your dopamine production, stimulating the pleasure centers of your brain. This is physically the same way heroin works, by the way. It's spiking your dopamine. They're making this stuff addictive, and the FDA is fine with it.
But
It's sneaky.
And that's why in other countries, which is crazy that Coca-Cola, I think, is in every single country in the world. And if it's this bad, because I've been to countries that have really strict, like FDAs or whatever their version of it is, like Australia. If you go, and I always try out McDonald's in other countries because it's like kind of a good way. So if you go to McDonald's in Australia, the food isn't as good. Like, you can just tell that it's just too healthy. Like, but then in America,
it is good, but it's not good.
it's not as tasty
Yeah.
as American McDonald's.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
McDonald's, you take a bite and they have put millions, probably billions of dollars into how to make this, like, make your mouth water more. And, like, they put so much sodium in it because it makes your mouth water and stuff like that. Where in Australia, they're more strict, so the food doesn't taste as good. And it's still probably really not that good for you. But then I believe it was Singapore. It was like the perfect balance. Like, it still tasted good, but you could tell, like, it wasn't just a grease ball like in America.
yeah.
okay, so I want to do a little exercise, all right? I want you to take one thing from there and say why it's, like, bad or why we shouldn't do it.
Bad or we shouldn't do
Yeah,
it.
name, like, one thing from there and you say, like, we shouldn't, or, like, one thing that you think is terrible.
Just
From the diagram?
10,
diagram, yeah.
10 tablespoons of sugar.
Okay, why is that a bad thing?
Because that's not cane sugar, it's white granulated sugar. And white granulated sugar is not good for you.
Okay, so
Sugar spikes your insulin, and if you spike your insulin too much, because obviously you don't go through one day by drinking a single can of Coke, you eat other things that also have sugar in them. When you start spiking your Coke, or you start spiking your sugar intake, you're out of here.
Yeah, I gotta go.
All right, thanks for coming, D.
Yeah.
Have everyone drive
Thank
safe.
you for having me.
You're welcome. When you spike your insulin like that, your pancreas has to secrete the insulin, and your pancreas can get tired out. Once that starts to happen, and all this sugar keeps hitting, that's when diabetes, type 2 diabetes, starts coming in. And right now, type 2 diabetes is on a massive rise, and it's causing a lot of issues for the government as a whole.
okay, so what should we do about this then? Should we limit the amount of sugar in there? Should we ban Coke?
I don't know. I think we need to educate better.
We'd always, but who is there anyone in America who thinks Coke's good for you? No.
I think there's a bunch of people who don't know that Coke is bad for you.
There's people in America who don't know that Coke's bad for you.
Oh, I would
Yes.
I think
totally
there's
say that.
a lot of people that know Coke's pretty
Well,
bad.
so here's the
No,
thing.
I-
There's people who will, they know, like, okay, Coca-Cola, they don't think it's good for you, but they don't think it's as bad as it really is. And they'll go and drink, like, Diet Coke and think they're being healthy. I know for a fact that there's people who drink Diet Soda because it has a little bit less sugar or whatever and think that it's a healthy drink.
No, I know for a fact, and this is a exact conversation I've had with one of my aunts, my great aunts. she came to me and she was talking to me about losing weight and exercising and all that. And I told her exercising is huge, but the biggest thing that you need to look at is your diet. Because technically, we'll get into that in a second if you want to, but because running really doesn't, like if you run and exercise, it really doesn't do that much for you as far as lowering your or upping your calorie burn. And I can explain, there's a couple studies done with that. But so I asked her, I'm like, well, so diet is the biggest thing. What are you eating? What are you drinking? So she explained to me, and in her hand was a ginger ale.
Man, I love some good ginger ale.
And so I was asking her, I'm like, she was like, I really don't eat anything bad, but I'm overweight. My doctor's telling me I need to lose weight. And again, on her doctor's side, I'm like, why isn't your doctor going through more of this with you? And we can talk about that in a minute if you want also. But I was like, okay, well, it seems like she's like, I make food at home, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, do you drink soda? She goes, no, I only drink ginger ale. I'm like, well, that's bad for you, right? She goes, no, it's not. And I'm like, how much of that do you drink a day? And she goes, about a 2 liter probably. I'm like, a day? And she goes, well, maybe every like 2 days I drink like a 2 liter amount of ginger ale. I'm like, that's horrible for you. And she goes, no, it's not. It's ginger ale. I'm like, have you ever looked at how much sugar is in ginger ale? She goes, no, ginger ale doesn't have that much sugar. And so I pulled up the nutrition list of, because she said she drinks about a 2 liter every 2 days. I pulled up the nutrition list. I'm like, this is how much sugar is in this. And here's your amount of daily sugar intake that you should have. And she was like triple the amount just off of the stuff she drank, just the soda. And I'm like, you can't be that ignorant. And she had no clue at all. And she was like 50, 55 at the time. Maybe getting into her 60s.
So I'm not going to go and argue like people are like, there are going to be some ignorant people and there are going to be some things. And I think that America, in terms of nutrition, probably does the much worse than like European countries, even though they're suffering from obesity, they're suffering from issues like this. The idea is that I don't like when people say like, oh, this one thing's bad for us, and the FDA just doesn't do anything. I think the FDA is doing something, but there's only so much. You can't just ban soda. You can't just ban these things. You can put labels on the cans. You can advertise that soda is bad for you. Drink more water. Drink more like less processed foods. But like, there's only so much you can do without going in and literally banning part of people's diets.
And that's the thing. Even with the Cuomo's, or was it Cuomo in New York that banned like the big cups and stuff like that, and that didn't work at all. Were you gonna say something, Michael?
So I have a couple of points, but just to respond to that, why don't we see government-funded ads on like television, YouTube, Facebook, that say, hey, they put a couple $1 million into this research. Hey, eat less processed food, drink more water. This should be how much water you should, like legitimate nutritional like content. So why don't we see that come out from the government if that's, what you were just saying?
My thing is, who's going to be the most susceptible to to actually take this advice?
Take what advice?
Like if you're telling somebody eat less processed food, drink more water, don't do these bad things, who's going to be more likely to take this advice?
Rich people.
Children. Kids. So what do? We put a food pyramid in school.
Kids don't.
Why haven't they come out with a new one yet then? That shows
They're always revising this thing. And different organizations have different food pyramids depending on what they want to show on theirs. But the idea is they're always this isn't something that's just they put out one and they're done with it.
Yeah.
So
I'm not trying to say there's this boogeyman hiding in the closet that's making people eat bad stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm saying just everything needs to be re-looked at, re-overhauled. And this is there's a lot of people talking about this is a issue of national security too, because people aren't going into the military because they're so overweight. And that's becoming a massive issue. And they're, they have all these trucks and stuff that are all made to fit like a normal, adult human male or female. And the seats aren't big enough. The tanks aren't big enough, like airplane cockpits and stuff like that.
Yeah. You can't be a 300-pound dude trying to get around inside of a tank.
Or a Humvee even.
Yeah.
And then you got gear and stuff like that. So there's all these people who are being turned away from the military simply just because of obesity. And that has nothing to do with even, I heard that the average person, type 2 diabetic or diabetic, costs the government, about $1 million for their lifetime, or $2 million for their lifetime. And with more and more people becoming diabetic, it's putting a massive strain on the government because these people are so unhealthy. And I don't think it's directly to the government. It's through insurance companies and all stuff like that. That because these people need medication for the rest of their life, and that goes not necessarily to they're going to die tomorrow, but it goes to the whole quality of life thing.
So, what I had written down that I wanted to make the point of is, so with the, do you guys remember all like the non-smoking commercials back in the day? And there was like this huge movement of like people against the tobacco industry and tobacco lobbyists and all that. So, one example that I can think of, and it kind of goes to like Diet Coke and regular Coke, is when
Someone said, "Now I'm worried about my taint size." Sorry, I had to read that. That just made me laugh.
So
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm really sorry.
no, it's fine. When I started smoking, when I used to smoke, I don't smoke anymore. I smoked Marlboro mediums. Well, at some point, Marlboro mediums didn't exist anymore because they deemed that as like it makes it sound like it's less bad for you because it's medium like strength kind of, so they had to call them Marlboro red labels.
Yeah.
And it was I don't know exactly what it is. I think it was a group, like an activist group, like the people that came up against the tobacco industry. And I think by like putting higher taxes on tobacco and stuff, really just trying to kind of put pressure on the tobacco industry. I think that we need to have something like that with the food industry. Like you're putting diet on your label, but and it's just misleading.
Yeah.
And I think it was Tim Pool. I was listening to him, and he was like talking about how Whole Foods has a section, and it's like, or I think they label everything as like, this is a whole food, this is a whole food. And he was talking about something like everything in the grocery store should be like, this is chemical, like processed trash food. Like put these labels up and then be like, this is normal food. Like don't even label it as whole foods. This is food. This is chemicals.
And I think you bring a very good point. Like I think correct me if I'm wrong, what you're trying to say is like, okay, this is a big issue. How do we fix this? What do we do about it? And that's a great question. I think that it has to more be like maybe a more cultural thing. And it's like, how do you do that? I think with stuff like this, like what we're doing right now, it's more of a cultural thing that we're doing. I think that's where the important comes from. It comes from people wanting to figure this stuff out for themselves. Because you and I both know right now, like if a majority of the people, let's just say 25% of the whole population was like, you know what, Coke is it's not going to kill me, but it's not good for me. I'm going to stop buying Coke. And 25% of the population stopped drinking Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola would be like, well, we ain't making that no more because nobody's buying it. And so I think one of my only things I could really like put forward, which this would cause a whole nother conundrum, would be the food industry, big Koch brothers and stuff like that, lobbying to the government and stuff like that for their particular food. And there really almost is no solution to it.
Well, you want to know what my honest opinion would be? So that scenario you're just talking about, and they're like, oh, let's just pull Coke off the shelves because it's a failing product.
Yeah.
I don't think they would do that. There's way too much money in Coke. Like we said, it's in every single country, I think, or at least almost every single country in the world. I think that if they realize that, like, okay, let's say the United States, they're not drinking Coke anymore. Like, our sales are going tanking. They're just going to repackage it. And this is the Coke Light, and it only has this many calories. It still has all these addictive chemicals in it, but this is our healthy Coke.
Did you ever hear about when they did that in the 80s or 90s?
No.
They came out with this thing called New Coke. And there's like New Coke and then there's the original.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what the big difference was, but I don't think there's that big of a difference. I think it was more of like a style of new can. And people were like, I can taste the difference. We hate it. And nobody bought it. And so Coke just went back to their old style. And there's like a conspiracy that like they actually kept the new Coke but just repackaged it as the old one so people would shut up and not
Oh, I'm sure they
keep
well
buying their product.
because you can taste the difference when people call it Mexican Coke.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's
it's-
made with real sugar.
It's made with real sugar, and it's like, why is that a thing in Mexico, not here? I mean, I guess they do sell it here, but hardly. It's in glass bottles and it's made with real sugar.
And the other thing too is I think that for instance, sometimes when we're talking about maybe some of these chemicals and stuff like that, I think that there is loopholes to the FDA and stuff like that. I don't know what they are. I can't give you an exact example, but like maybe the FDA has came in and said, look, Coca-Cola, you can't use real sugar because real sugar, we know this much is bad for you. So then Coca-Cola goes, oh, well, we have this alternative sweetener that we're using and it doesn't fall under your guidelines or it makes it past your guidelines, even though it might be like a one chemical different or one thing that's, just barely different, but has pretty much the same effect as sugar. And that could even be an issue, and it's like, how do you fix this whole thing? Dude, I don't know. I really don't. I think it's just people just need to inform themselves about what's more healthy and what's not healthy. And they need to look at the data. But the thing is, people aren't going to. And I get what you're saying. Like the government is trying to do what they're trying. And I'm just saying, I'm being a critic and I'm quarterbacking from my couch type thing. And I'm like, what you guys are doing isn't working and it freaking sucks. But something needs to be done.
Yeah.
Maybe mandatory military service, so then everyone is forced to eat a certain thing and work out all the time.
I hate the idea of mandatory military service.
Honestly, I hate the idea of mandatory military service in this country.
I'll give my final thoughts. I think that at the end of the day, the main reason why they probably haven't gone and banned this is because people really like Coke. People like these things. They like all the different like products they can choose from, like Sprite, Coke, and they don't. I don't think people really care whether or not they're going to have like issues later down the line because they compartmentalize it as like, well, that's a problem like 30 years. I want this Coke right now. I want that today.
Yeah, it's like when you're a kid, or maybe not a kid, but when you're 21 years old and you just go out binge drinking all the time. You're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I don't care if this is going to affect me later in life. Like, well, this is fun now, so this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. I think that the FDA could do some more stuff, but in order for them to do more stuff, they're going to have to ban things, and these are things that people want. So we're at this impasse.
Well, there are things people want, and there are things that have a lot of money behind them.
I wouldn't want to say this is like completely something that just like that the Coke's lobbying for, like covering stuff up, because I want to see what they're covering up.
I'm not saying they're covering stuff up, but they have dumped tons of money into marketing and into their products and all their industry and stuff like that. So they're going to fight tooth and nail with their lawyers and their lobbyists and stuff like that.
I would agree that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible to ban something.
No.
It's the same with like the oil industry.
Yeah.
Like we know that oil is not the whole thing with like or maybe it was oil industry and I think like railroads or whatever, but like the only reason that we don't have like bullet trains that are way more efficient for travel around in the US is it was like lobbied against by like the oil industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So money, it's just a point that money does really take control at the end of the day.
I don't like the idea that money controls everything, that these people can lobby for anything they want. Because at the end of the day, if that were true, we'd see these policies that are like only 30% of people like actually agree with getting pushed through the Congress. But like that's not what I typically see. And with like I don't like the idea that lobbying controls America. Because in reality, the most popular policy is going to get pushed through, but there are going to be companies that are going to do what they can to kind of persuade that.
I've seen studies that were done by Vice. Vice did studies on this.
I think I've seen the same thing.
Yeah, showing that the stuff that the lobbyists go for get passed like 78% of the time.
Yeah,
and the stuff that the population likes is like 50% of the time.
Yeah, they're going to do all like those weird studies where they're saying like lobbying controls this stuff. But at the end of the day, like a lot of companies hate war. War drives down their stock, drives down the economy, does shitty things for everybody. But we still go to war.
Definitely not everybody.
That's not true.
For a lot of people.
That's
for a lot
not
of
true.
lobbyists. What do you mean?
A lot of economists said that the reason why we came out of the Great Depression was because of World War II. And
War
and,
is
and World War One is what put the United States on the economic map. We were like,
It's good for like steel industries and companies that are directly involved with war, but like for other companies everywhere else, it's not.
if
But
we're
for
talking
the-
specifically for America, war has been great for
yeah,
this country.
war.
For like specifically those industries that are involved with war.
No. As a country as a whole.
All right. Well, I'm gonna have to go and read up on this and figure this
Okay,
out.
go. Okay, in World War One, right? In World War, I'll give you the brief history. In World War One, the United States was providing to Germany and the UK. And
No, I know.
They were
We're-
making, hold on. They were making a lot of money off this, and the UK was in debt to us. And they moved the world like central banks from London to New York. So we held all their reserves and pretty much became the central hub of banking in the world. And that's what put the US on the map. Like US was kind of like equals with the UK and equals with like all of the rest of Europe and stuff like that. After World War One, we were the biggest country in the world economically.
That's okay. That's like a specific like policy change. What I'm saying is, I know that our economy grows whenever we go to war. What I'm saying, most of the industries don't have anything to do with war. Those industries get hurt. Whereas these industries like steel industries, these companies that actually make like the military hardware, maybe some sort of like actual R&D, the idea is these people gain, these people lose, and there's more people on this side than there are on this side.
Yeah, but is there more money on one side than the other?
Theoretically, you'd have to pull money from somewhere. There has to be
Well,
some more spending onto like war than
So
there
the-
is like.
But the
hope.
thing is, what I'm thinking of is, so yeah, like maybe the food industry is like goes down or something like that. But think of like the government as a whole. Like the second war breaks out, all government funding goes through the roof.
Okay, we should have a whole nother podcast on like lobbying. I would really like to, but because there's a whole like, I think there's a lot to lobbying, a lot more than just these people get money, these people don't have money, these people get votes, these people don't. I
No,
think
it's
super-
definitely a way more complicated system than just like, oh, here, I'm going to give you $1 million, get
Yeah.
this through.
I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just saying there's a shitload there that we could easily untangle and break down. Which I don't think we have time to break down this podcast, and I don't have the know-how to show those different methods. Like last time I looked at it was like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think that money is definitely a player, and it's definitely a major player in all of this, in the war, in the food industries and stuff like that. Because whenever you have like no company is going to just like lay down and like, oh, I guess we can't do this no more. Like they're gonna fight tooth and nail as much as they can. They're gonna pull every string they can, and I think in certain ways that can be an issue, but as far as just to get back on the topic, and this is the last thing I'll say to this, and the whole food pyramid and all that stuff is, if you're out there and you're listening to this right now, you should very well know what is going into your mouth and what it is doing to you. I think that is like, you should be obligated to understand that. And if you're a Christian, you should definitely be looking into that. And I think that you are a detriment to not society as a whole, not the country, not all that, but to your own family. And especially if you are a man and you want to be a man who can provide and protect and do all those things, like, and you want to be a prepared man, like you should be in some way healthy. And that most of that goes into what are you putting in your mouth and what does it do to you and what's better X, Y, Z, and what do I need more of, what do I need less of. As an individual, because I really, me and Matthew talk a lot about, the government and what the government should push and this and that and the other thing. But what it comes down to at the end of the day is like, what are you doing yourself for you? What diet works for you? And how do you become better? And if you haven't looked into it, you need to look into it. It needs to be a part of your life, something you understand in and out to the fullest potential.
Yeah, and one thing that I would just say on that is next time you go, or you don't even have to when you go grocery shopping, but just pick stuff out of your fridge and pantry and just turn it around and look at like what the ingredients are.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a block list of ingredients this big and you can't pronounce anything, like it's probably not food and you probably shouldn't eat it. But like if I love the example of Tabasco. Tabasco, you turn it around, it's like pepper, vinegar, salt, and water or something like. There's like 4 ingredients to Tabasco, and then you can you can look at anything, any like Whole Foods, and it should only have like 5 or 6 ingredients max.
Yeah, and if the last thing to say, sorry, if any of you guys are interested in diet and stuff like that, and you want the bare minimum basics, like absolute bare minimum, drink water, sleep good, and get at least 150 grams of protein into your diet. You can start there. That's like super easy, super basic. Drink water, enough water. You can look up how much you need per day, and eat enough protein to rebuild your body, and sleep. That's the basics. Start off on that. The last thing that I thought we could talk about, which I haven't brought up.
Can I quickly just kind of finish off? I'll add to what you did.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that you're absolutely right. I think that every single person has a moral obligation. Like, I don't think that you just naturally, I think everyone is morally obligated to find the truth in something. I can't read 5 words, make an interpretation, and believe that my entire life. Otherwise, I'm psychotic and I'm like an idiot. I think everyone has a moral obligation to constantly change, or not change your opinion, but look deeper into it. Like, if you have the same opinion you've had for 2 years, and you're like, you shouldn't think, wow, this is a really good opinion that I have. You should think, wow, this opinion hasn't changed in 2 years. I'm not focusing enough on this, or this is something, if this is something that's affecting me, I have an obligation to go and look that up.
Yeah.
Because it's going to affect other people as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then you can also give other people more information, new information, stuff like that. Okay, the last thing that I want to talk about was the whole Crowder thing.
Oh boy, I haven't been paying attention at all to this. I listened to like a little bit of Tim Cast when he first brought it up, but
So, and we can just run over this pretty quick. It's already 8:30, and we've been going on for
2 hours.
2 hours. So, and I wanted to kind of keep this right at 2 hours, but we can just kind of run over this real quick for people that didn't know. I can start. I think that it was kind of blown out of proportion. I think, like, to a certain extent, like everyone covered it like it was massive news, and I don't really think it was that massive of a news story. And I get it, like, and I'm kind of on the fence about the whole thing, because I like the Daily Wire and I like Crowder at the same time. And I think that, the whole recording the phone call thing was a little bit, that was kind of a little scammy.
I think that was super bad. It wasn't like the way, I think recording the phone call can be good, but the way he did it, no matter how you would explain it, like the way he did it was bad.
I think, so my one thing I'll say about that is, if his intentions are truly what he said, then I can at least, at a bare minimum, understand why he recorded it. Yeah. If his intentions are totally true, and like he is like, he really wants to fight, like the whole, a lot of people call it like the golden handcuffs type thing, like these contracts forcing you into, shitty situations and stuff like that. I think that if he really hates that and really wants something to be done about it, I understand his reasoning to record behind recording it, but that doesn't mean I think it was a good idea to do it. I think he would have been way better off like recording it and writing down like some points from the conversation, or
just taking the actual recording, taking out any information that is like you can't show, and then just releasing that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
that's exactly what you
yeah.
yeah.
I don't even like the whole, like the recording itself. Like, I think that he could have just talked about it or said like, hey, I had a conversation with blah 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 blah. This is what was said in it, and here's the points that stuck out to me, rather than just being like. And I get where he's coming from a little bit with the, if he said that, then people are, oh, did you really say that on the phone though?
The problem that I have is, he knew going into that call that he was going to just clip farm that guy. He was asking.
He's going to record it.
Pointed questions. Not even that. Like, he knew that he was going to take points away from this guy and show them in a bad light.
Well, and the thing is, so first of all, I didn't really like pay close attention to this because, like you said, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. If anything, it's like, dude, I don't care if you take a contract from someone or not. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
whatever. It's a business deal. If you don't do it, fine. If you do it, fine. Doesn't affect me. And with recording a phone call, if I'm making a multi-million-dollar business deal, I am recording and keeping record of every single thing that is said. A phone call, email, everything. I would record a conversation between me and someone on something that big.
Yeah.
But to go and release it, I don't even know what was said. I never even heard it, but I'm sure it was either pettiness or maybe it was even just like maybe his ratings were down. He was trying to get his ratings back up. I'm not saying that's true, but I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I don't think it's malicious to record someone, but if you're going to go out and, like, put it to the public, it just seems weird.
I think it starts muddying the water a little bit for his side of the argument. But that's the thing. If he's a smart person, which I think he generally is, he's not an idiot, wouldn't he know that going ahead, like, hey, this is going to look really bad on me, but I feel obligated with my belief about this whole scenario that it's something I have to do. Like
So, actually, could you, because I have, like, the littlest bit of understanding, could you just give, like, a short breakdown of, like, the scenario?
what all happened? And correct me if I'm wrong. Matthew can add in. Pretty much, he was working for the Blaze. He quit working for the Blaze, or his contract was going to be up, so he was shopping for a new company to
So
potentially.
his, like, Louder with Crowder wasn't, is that not his own thing, or?
It is, but he was underneath the Blaze TV.
Okay.
So that's what, like, the media.
He was essentially kind of like a channel under
Yeah.
this.
Even though he had his own
provider or
thing and stuff
whatever.
like that, but he was part of them. And so his contract was up. So then he was looking for a new contract. And he said he got multiple offers from different people. And when he got, in the beginning, we didn't know it was the Daily Wire. He got their term sheet. There's all these penalties for having strikes against your contact or your content being demonetized, handing over Facebook stuff, owning the rights to certain videos and stuff like that that he would produce on their channel. And then after that, he pretty much talked to them. He said, I can't believe this stuff it wasn't a contract. It was a term sheet. And everyone's been making that distinction. Like, it wasn't like a contract that you handed over. It was a term sheet that was handed to him. Like, hey, here's the basic outline of what a contract would look like. He disagreed with it. Pretty much decided against it. Was hoping that, like, I really hope that you don't have the same contract for the other people that you have. And then months later, he created a website, the Big Con, like in December. Then after he created the website, he recorded the phone call.
Yeah, it was 36 days after he created the website. He went and got a phone call from that guy and then made a video saying, this is like bits and pieces of this phone call that they were describing. And like,
Then he came out and made the video.
Yeah. So essentially, he thought something in the contract was like immoral that the.
yeah.
So his biggest thing, and I listened to his whole thing, and I listened to the Daily Wire's thing, and so the Daily Wire outed themselves, and some people are saying, like, well, if you read that contract that Crowd released in his first video, even though he didn't mention the Daily Wire, people from the Daily Wire recognized it and said this looks a lot like Daily Wire's contract. But a lot of people guessed it might have been the Daily Wire, but Daily Wire they outed themselves because they posted a video saying, like, hey, we did send this contract to him.
Yeah.
And then his biggest thing with that was, you're going to give me this much money, and I am trying to fight against big tech and social media and all that, and you're going to penalize me if I don't stay monetized by them. And he's like, I kind of get it. Understand that you need to make money, and, like, I'm working for you and I need to make money. But if us as a conservative group and movement are trying to combat these rules and stuff, why are we just playing right into their hands and, pretty much letting them control what we say?
Yeah. So the Daily Wire is kind of playing the game of big tech and the left because they're making a lot of money off of it. But Crowder's take on it is like, this is immoral. You should go against it.
And the reason why he was saying, I think it's wrong, is I think specifically because he's like, the people that pay for my show, the people that pay my salary want us to combat this. And I am doing them an injustice by not combating what big tech is doing to the conservative movement and stuff like that.
So why doesn't he just go independent?
So he talked a little bit about that. And a lot of people are saying, he's just doing all this as a big stunt because he is going to go independent. He wants all this media hype.
Oh, getting all the hype.
And that's what he wants.
And support. Because if he's coming out and saying, hey, these guys are supporting big tech, screwing over the little guy, whatever, this is exactly what we're against. Come to my platform now, and we're actually against all of this and we won't do that. But honestly, just from like looking at this from a small breakdown, it just sounds like the most Republican thing ever.
Yeah, I know.
Just like fighting each other over, you're supposed to like unify and try to come together as like conservatives, and it just sounds like way more just Republican to me. Just fighting each other when you should be fighting a cause.
And so my one thing that he personally said about the whole like create his own company or his own media group and stuff like that is he was saying like, I really don't want to do that. And he said, I really wanted to go down the road of just like quitting and just being done with all of this. And that's whether that's true or not, whether he actually that's in his consideration. He said he was still considering just being done with the whole thing. Whether that's true or not, we will never know. But supposedly that's one of the things that he said. What did
everything that he did, like, all right, if you were doing this in a very legit, really formal way, he would talk to them behind the scenes and have a talk with them. Like, hey guys, this isn't right. This isn't what we should do. But he never did that.
He said he did.
When?
He said that
when he sent back the initial contract?
No, he said he had other talks after that.
But like there were things also in that interview where he was saying like they would have impropriety over my channel or these things and certain things like that just wasn't true. Like he would say things with the contract.
No, they weren't 100% true. They were like they would own some content that he made. Like the content wouldn't be all his. Now the Daily Wire clarified and said no, stuff that he makes, outside of X, Y, and Z would be his, and maybe his old stuff would all still be his. But what he said wasn't. He might have been exaggerating, or maybe he's just ill-informed, and maybe he was lying to a certain extent. But they would own some amount of his content, and so I don't necessarily think that he just flat out lied and said, did he say like they were going to own all my content? I can't remember the exact words he used.
Impropriety over his channel and his like personal mug club or whatever, I believe was what he was talking about.
I think I haven't like looked at the contract, but I know there's kind of a debate because I listened to the Daily Wire version, their breakdown of everything, and when they talked about that, he had mentioned something about it not being exactly true and that they would own a substantial amount and stuff like that. But flat out lying, I don't know if I would say flat out lying, misconstruing maybe, or
I think at the end of the day,
like, let me just ask you this question real quick. Do you think that this is all totally malicious on his side?
Everything that I've seen kind of points me to believe that. Like, there's nothing like he specifically made StopBigCon.com, and then 36 later he had that phone call. He didn't release it in like any proper manner. He took specific clips that were extremely reasonable if you look at it from like just like a regular point. Like they were saying like, hey, this is our term of contract. This is how we do business. You can say that's bad, but if we were to write it up any different way, you'd be making the same amount of money. The idea is like, we're just trying to say that if you do get monetized, we'll give you more money. If you do these things, you'll get more money. But the idea is like, you're still like that. The whole point was to show like, I don't know. He was trying to put them in the worst light possible. And they just happen to be his biggest competitor if he does become like his own platform.
Well, the one thing that he kept saying is, I don't care about the money.
Well, he can say that. He can say all he wants. But at the end of the day, like whenever he actually goes and like, if he makes his own platform, then that just kind of plays right into. He's like, oh, I guess I just have to make my own platform now to combat them. Like it just seems all so convenient. Obviously, I don't know the truth. Obviously, we can probably just wait and figure it out.
Yeah. Well, I think that if he truly believes that these contracts are detrimental to up and coming, conservative media players and stuff like that, and he truly believes that his followers and the people paying his salary and paying into Mug Club, they want people to combat big tech, and when he goes to a big company, and it's like you can look at it maliciously, and you can look at it in the words that he said, and it's kind of you can choose which one to believe, type thing. That's what, and I think I'm kind of in the middle. I'm kind of like, did he do some stuff that was possibly malicious to build him up for the future? Maybe, but was it all because I just want to make more money? Because he specifically said, like, I don't care how much money I make. That wasn't even the big issue to me. The big issue to me wasn't the $50 million, which I think a lot of people misunderstood the whole $50 million thing. It was $50 million over 4 years, which is 12.5 million a year. If my math is right, 12.5 million a year. And that 12.5 million doesn't go, it's not all to him, it's to his whole company. So they're paying his whole company 12.5 million. And he had said that like one Change My Mind series cost $50,000 to make. So he's saying this 12 million per year is split up between, paying my employees, paying for all the infrastructure, paying to make the videos and stuff like that. So it wasn't like, oh my gosh, he's making this boatload of money and it's not good enough. And one of the other things he said was like, well, the Daily Wire was like, oh, we'll take care of your social media and stuff like that. And he goes, I already have somebody that does that. And so I really think that if what he says is true, if what he says his intentions are true, I can understand why he's going about it in this way. That doesn't mean, again, like I said before, it doesn't mean I agree with recording the phone call or anything like that. Maybe he is trying to build up and do this big publicity stunt. I think some of the things people said before of like, maybe the Daily Wire and Steven Crowder are in cahoots together because they are such close friends. They want to boost both their numbers.
Building up hype.
I wouldn't put that past the Daily Wire either.
I don't know about that. I think that's a bit far.
It's definitely a low probability that is the truth, but it is still a possibility.
Yeah. I don't know, because there's so many. You have to get everybody in Daily Wire involved. You have to get Ben Shapiro to kind of just make up a story about how he doesn't like Steven Crowder. I don't know. That just seems like wild to me.
No, it definitely would be wild, but I'm still saying it is a possibility. Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring are the two CEOs of the company. Well, I think there's 4 total. I think there's 2 other people that we really don't know about, but I wouldn't put it past them. Scheme to try and drum up some publicity. I mean, other big media companies have done worse things for less. But I think people made a big deal about it, and it really wasn't that big of a deal. Like, everyone started picking, like, let me get your opinion on this. One of the things I can't stand is when something happens like this whole crowd thing, everyone just picks a side instantly. Like, oh my gosh, how could you criticize Ben Shapiro's company? Steven Crowder, I hate you now. And I'm like, and so like someone in our group chat was like, oh, who you guys think is in the wrong? And this is like when he first posted the very first video. And it was like, I can't believe he would do that to the Daily Wire. Like, he sucks. And I'm like, you don't even know the whole story yet.
Well, to be fair, when Steven Crowder went on that podcast with Tim Pool, he's not going to give out any concrete evidence for why he's wrong. You're only going to hear him give his light of the story and see it's only going to help his side. But the idea is he didn't. A lot of the things he said were exaggerated, like we said. Even though they maybe weren't true, maybe they were some form of exaggeration. And also the things he did before that, just the context around how he clipped videos, when he decided to make the stopbigcon.com. When he decided to do these things, it's it all culminates and it says it seems like he's just making this big campaign against Daily Wire, and he's not doing it in a very legitimate way.
Well, one of the things he specifically said over and over and over throughout that whole podcast, that interview with Tim Pool, was, I'm not trying to fight the Daily Wire. I'm trying. He goes, there's
he's gonna say that. That's exactly.
I know that's what he's going to say.
He's like a lawyer.
What I'm saying is, if you take him at his word, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Make a choice whether you want to take him at his word or not. He kept saying, I'm not trying to just fight against the Daily Wire because there's more people that sent me offers and they sucked, or they were disingenuous and stuff like that. I did not like them. And if that's true, then there is, and I wouldn't disagree that there's an issue with the way that these companies create contracts and stuff like that, because what Michael said earlier, they have these super massive lawyers going through everything and picking out all these details and pretty much making you, I don't want to say a slave to their company, but for lack of a better term, being controlled by that company. And I really think that we'll see what he does in the future. We'll have to just, see what happens. But on my question to you before was, when people like see a thing and a piece of information comes out and everyone just like picks one side automatically and like, oh, I hate that side now. Like, what do you think about that?
I think everyone has fundamental beliefs, and the idea is sometimes something will come out and you'll think that it kind of pushes against that belief, and the idea is you're going to immediately be against it because everything that you've seen leading up to that point was like, seems like it's against it. But the idea is like,
I'm saying when he posted the very first video, before any of that stuff was even known.
like Steven Crowder, or
yeah, when Crowder posted the first video, the first Stop Big Con video.
I don't know what was in the video exactly. I didn't really watch the whole.
He went over the term sheet and the names and the amount of money was all redacted.
People can read that and probably get that interpretation because it's like, if this is a contract, like how could they write that contract to where, like at the end of the day, no matter how they write that contract, you're probably making the same money, if not less. I can't imagine a way where I can write that contract where you're making like unless you expect them to lose money somehow, or lose something.
Like the Daily Wire isn't. They're gonna like. Are you saying they're gonna argue in their best interest to be able to be profitable?
In a way, but at the same time, it's like obviously they're gonna argue to be profitable. They have to be profitable. If they're not profitable, they're losing money and they're going down.
It's stupid.
Yeah, but the idea is like, how is he saying like why are they structuring it to where we have to follow these company rules? It's like, well, how do we structure it in a way where it doesn't follow those rules and where everyone's still making money and very, very happy? Like, how do you do that? Like you have to make it to where you're taking all these incentives and you're like, you only make this much per year, but that money is going to be like 20 million instead of 50 million, when you could be making 50 million.
And I know I understand. I get both parties, but then I think where Crowder is coming from a little bit is like they're the ones saying that we're combating big tech, but when behind closed doors, they're just falling in line, and he thinks that's a massive issue.
So let's say that the ways that they don't fall in line would lose them money and they'd go bankrupt. Would you say that they have to fall in line?
Yeah. No. I think that it's just it's just a purely like a moral thing. Like, hey, we stand against this thing, but behind closed doors, we really don't stand against that.
But I don't think that, in a way, I don't think that they actually stand. I think they are against big tech. I think that anybody who watches like Daily Wire show like they're against these big tech platforms. Ben Shapiro is very like avidly like against these things. I don't think that character, like the way they're losing the demonetization, all these different like things about the contract change what is being said on their channel necessarily. I don't think that's actually causing that effect. Where it's like, I don't think they're lying to their fans by saying we're against big tech, but we're secretly for big tech. It's like, I think they're against big tech, but they're working within the confines of the system to do their best to be against big tech. I don't think anyone else can do it any better way.
And the thing is, they could be just doing whatever it takes right now to just put out the content, get the message out. But behind closed doors, they could be working on a different system where they don't have to be supported by.
Yeah, like Rumble.
Well, so one of the other things he said, because Tim Pool gets criticized on that a lot. People say like, oh, you follow big tech's rules and then you speak out against it all the time. But he's very open, and he said like multiple times, like, I understand that I word my things and I say things in a certain way because of the rules of big tech. And he goes, but he's upfront about it, to whereas a lot of the, not just the Daily Wire, but a lot of these other big, the Blaze TV, all these things, it's all behind. They're not upfront like, hey, we're trying to follow the rules that YouTube sends to us so that we can stay on the platform but still try and make a difference. They're like, no, we're combating big tech with everything that we can, but then behind closed doors, like, hey, you better follow YouTube's rules because we can't let you get demonetized. And when the people who are paying your salary want you to lay it out there on the line, that's where he said he was coming from. Like, these people, the people that pay for my channel, the people that pay for my content and watch my content, they want me to combat them. Like, I have been to court so many times with YouTube, and I've found other ways to make money outside of just being monetized by YouTube. Like, it is possible. And I don't think there's really any big nefarious stuff going on here or there behind closed doors with like the Daily Wire and stuff like that. I think they're a company. They're trying to be profitable, because if you're not profitable, you can't stay a company. So everyone understands their side, their point of view. And I think what Crowder is saying is like, hey, I want to see you go all in. type thing. Like he's like, I'm willing to lose everything to fight this system that I don't necessarily believe in. You guys are willing to play ball with them, and that's another debatable thing too. Is you know, the Daily Wire and stuff like that, are they really, you know, do we take their word that they're really combating big tech, or are they just saying stuff to make it look like they're combating big tech because YouTube's paying a massive chunk of their salary? So are we going to take their word that they're actually combating it when behind closed doors they're having drinks with all the CEOs at YouTube and, you know, higher ups at YouTube and stuff like that? Who knows? But that's partially, I think, where he's coming from. I think that he made a big deal out of something that wasn't that big of a deal. I've said that, you know, many times thus far. But
And I think at the end of the day, most conservatives support most of the content that comes out of both of those companies.
Yeah.
So it's like, if this one little issue of like, oh, you're supporting big tech by, you know, abiding by their rules and doing this, but by doing that, you're putting out this massive, massive industry of like good content that's, you know, you're still fighting the fight, just you can't fight the big tech fight right now.
Yeah.
And I would assume, knowing, you know, and listening to a lot of the people on the Daily Wire, that they don't agree with big tech, whatever, and they probably do have a plan when they build up enough capital in their business to either go independently somehow or whatever it takes to so they don't have to rely on big tech anymore. But tech's massive. Like the Daily Wire is a big successful company, but they're nothing compared to like Google, Amazon, and all that. And you can see they're trying to scale their business. They're doing movies and having new big hosts, getting Jordan Peterson on, like big money, like big investments to try to scale that business. But you're not going to be able to play ball with Google and Amazon after being a thing for a couple of years, you know? You need a lot. I don't know. Like Dallas said, it sounds like he's probably creating a little bit of controversy. Like Dallas said, it sounds
my bad.
Making too big of a deal out of this. Essentially just to, I don't know, maybe he had a plan of going independent the whole time.
Oh, real quick.
Or if not, now he has a good opportunity to go independent.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of done with this subject. I wanted to bring this up. This is something that kind of just came out recently, but Ty put it in here, so I'm really thankful that he did. Did you guys hear about the Russia buying the old Taliban U.S. military stuff?
Yeah, this is gonna get into an Afghanistan debate. I don't know if you guys want to get into it. We argued about that we argued about that for hours. Oh my goodness! If you guys want to, we can talk about it.
No, I'm just asking if we've all
just that specific thing.
Yeah, I'm not amazed by it. It's gonna happen.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Not that you could ever really see it coming, but it's just like, come on, you know, this is ridiculous and kind of dumb.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you leave, like, all these weapons and equipment and stuff in the hands of the Taliban. Like, you see videos of them, like, joyriding helicopters and crashing them. Like, even the Taliban is probably smart enough to know, like, hey, we could just sell this and make a lot of money.
All right. I want to have, like, all right, so are you guys just saying, like, this is just, like, something shitty that happened, or are you saying, like, there's somebody responsible, there's parties responsible? Like, are you saying, like, because obviously it's shitty that Russia's going to get this equipment. It's shitty that we had to leave it there, but, like, what's the broader thing we're trying to get at is what I'm saying.
I think the big thing is that
you should have blown it up better.
We didn't have to leave it there.
Could have bombed it.
We had to, though. That was the whole thing.
Kaboom the entire base.
But no, it's not about leaving. The reason why that equipment was there was because we're leaving it for the Afghan soldiers, which we thought would hold out for years, and then our actual statistics said, like, well, they might last like a few months. The idea is we can't train this military up for 20 years, give them a bunch of equipment, and then immediately when we're like, oh, we're about to leave, take all the equipment and fly away in our helicopters.
I got an idea. We should have gave them Russian equipment because that's what they're used to.
But probably. But the idea is like, there's nothing that we could have done to take that out. And the one main thing why I think that this is true is because there was nobody at the time, no generals that were like, hey, we should take all this equipment and leave with it, when that was happening. Now, there might be people now who are like, hey, we probably should have taken that shit out. Or maybe we should have done this differently. But like at the time, we thought we were doing the best thing we could possibly do. Like this plan was drawn up the years
They
before.
were wrong.
What?
I mean, I think
They were wrong.
maybe
Yeah.
someone thought that they were, but I think that there was, even if a general didn't come out in public with a statement, I can almost guarantee that there was several talks from probably the lowest level down all the way up to the president saying, this is a horrible plan. We need to come up with a better plan. Like, we know that, X, Y, and Z is going to happen the second we leave. Like, we can't do this yet. We need to come up with a better plan. We need to establish,
And I'm not trying to go back on anything I said before in like that previous podcast, but there was a lot of people saying we shouldn't leave at all. That was definitely part of the conversation. Isn't that why Mattis left his position? Like, because he disagreed with Trump on staying in Afghanistan or not?
Yeah, I believe it was that policy. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, he did. I think he was disagreeing with the pullout, and the way that I see it is, I don't know. It's tough because like you can't just sit around in Afghanistan forever, but you do.
We sat around in Germany forever.
Well, that's the thing. So everywhere where we've gone to war, pretty much we have established bases that are still there. Like think Germany, like
Japan.
largest military hospital in the world's in Germany, and it's ours. Or is it ours?
I'm pretty sure.
I'm pretty sure it's ours. I don't want to like. Maybe it's like a joint. It's
might
probably
be
a joint Germany Army base or whatever. Japan, huge Marine base in Japan because Marines were fighting the Pacific campaign in World War II. Even like Korea, I believe, Marines. I don't know if there's a set like Marine Corps base, but Marines do tons of training with the South Koreans. And it's like,
We never left those places.
yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can just. I think it was very predictable what was going to happen. And I don't know what the best course of action is if leave a limited number of troops, create like an actual fortified military base somewhere in that, at least in that region. But I think just pulling out, leaving everything behind, and maybe it was leave it behind for the Afghans, but I'm sure like the Afghans weren't trained properly on everything. So I'm sure there was even a plan of like, hey, if we're going to leave like millions, billions dollars worth of equipment behind, we should probably at least know that these guys know how to use it. Because if they don't know how to use it, we might as well take it with us or destroy it because it's just going to fall into the wrong hands.
I think that you could have that talk, but at the end of the day, no matter what, if you blow up that equipment or take it, the view afterwards is going to be, you guys train these guys, you guys put everything into them, and at the end you gave up on them, you blew up their equipment, and you left them to die. Like that's going to be the talk then. I think that no matter what, the only thing, which, I mean, like there are going to be other things that we could do. I think that just getting out of Afghanistan in general was probably the best thing that could have happened, and I think it's going to always be shitty no matter which way we do it, but I think that just getting out was good, at least.
I mean, I feel like I said, we could have probably benefited more from leaving a small force there. And even if you look up, eventually maybe pulling out completely, but I don't know. It's tough because what can you really do with Afghanistan? Like, we knew what was going to happen when we pulled out.
Yeah. It's
in years up to that event, it was pretty... Like there wasn't many deaths, not a lot of combat going on. Just to have like a base established, you send Marines and soldiers to go there on deployments, cycle through. Like it didn't really seem like things were going horribly before we did that, and then we did that, and it's like chaos.
All right, yeah, no, I overall, as a shitty scenario, I think that there's some things we may been able to do differently, but I think at the time when we were going through it, I think it's just good we got out. I don't know, Dallas, if you have anything.
No, I think that's pretty good. I think overall, with like the comment that was posted and stuff like that. I think that it was just it's just sucks. You know, there really is no like fixing it. You know, but it just sucks. And now it's like I think that because now, well, one thing that we probably could actually talk about a tiny bit is the U.S. and Germany sending their tanks over. Like I think Germany's sending however many Leopard 2 tanks.
Yeah, we sent 31 tanks, I believe.
31 M1 Abrams tanks over there, and it's like, is that escalation? Is it not escalation? Is NATO pretty much providing stuff to Ukraine now? Like, because we're not just providing aid now, we're providing like heavy military equipment.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's like, Russia's going to see it as escalation? Like that they just are.
They can see it as escalation, but the idea is we don't want to see Ukraine fall into Russia's hands, because if it falls into Russia's hands, they're just going to go to the next country and do the same thing again. You know, and they're going to keep doing this until one country stands up to them. And right now, Ukraine seems like the best country to do that. And we can say like, yeah, this is going to cause nuclear war, it's going to cause all these different things, but like, I don't see us just giving up on Ukraine and then saying like, all right, just take them over, make them a puppet, and they're going to do this again and again until something happens. And the idea is also, if we just let them take Ukraine and just give up on them, all of NATO looks terrible then. We look really, really weak. And that makes it so that like the whole NATO pact, like that might cause Russia to attack a NATO country then. It might cause, like, there's a bunch of things that we can't.
Did Ukraine ever join NATO?
No, they didn't.
I know they
applied for
applied
But-
for it.
Yeah.
And
I think
so this is what I hate about our military is everyone says like, why do we always need to be the world's police force? We always need to get involved with anything. And then something like Ukraine happens, and everyone's like, we need to support them fully. We need to give them, we need to,
Yeah.
and then it's like, so you want us to be the world's police force, right? But you just said that, why do we have to get involved? You know what? It's always such a double standard, and it's like, it's damned if you do, damned if you don't.
But to be fair, who's saying that though? Like, it's both people on the right and the left, you know?
Well, I
it
think
comes
the
to
left's viewpoint is very much like the U.S. does not need to be the world's police force, right?
Yeah, but also Trump, when he came in, his whole thing was isolationism. He wanted to basically get rid of NATO. Like he put a bunch of sanctions, I think, on Germany, to where I think that Germany joined whenever Trump was president, but they weren't going to because of the changes that he was making. And like he pulled a bunch of funding from NATO. He was a very isolationist guy, and he also pushed these narratives of like, we don't want to push for this. We don't want to be the world's police.
Well, the thing is with NATO, and I would probably agree with Trump with what he did, is NATO is literally the U.S. with a tiny bit of support from other countries. That's all NATO is. Like, I don't know if you can look this up, but I'm pretty sure like 80% of the bill from NATO comes from us, 80% of the personnel, equipment. It's the U.S. military with a tiny bit of support from other countries.
I would agree, but we also gain a lot from NATO, because
Yeah, but I think other countries. Think about it. If we didn't have NATO and all these other countries were all individual, I mean, I guess you got like European Union and stuff.
Yeah.
But all these countries are independent and they don't have this massive force of the U.S. military behind them. I mean, we benefit, I guess, because there's not a bunch of little wars going on and whatever. But I don't know. I feel like
It's more
other countries need to step up more in NATO because it's, like I said, it's the U.S.
Yeah, we can say that
doing everything.
the main reason why we have NATO is because we want to make sure that if this country, instead of them like researching nuclear arms or getting nuclear arms, we are their nuclear arms. We are that for them. We are their police. Like they don't need to worry about that. And then it creates one less country with nuclear arms. And the idea is if we keep doing that, we can have all these countries have that like method. We can have one country that has all the accessibility to the nukes, and we're like, all right, you guys don't have to do that. We don't have to risk that chance of them throwing nukes at other people.
I'd let them do it because it's not like they have the money to do it anyways.
But it definitely is possible for them to gain that ability, you know, but with NATO, they don't have to. And then also,
I think that's a very simplistic argument for something that is very, very, very difficult.
no, yeah, it leads on to other things as well. It's like if they're a NATO country, Russia isn't going to attack a NATO country because we're backing them, and that makes it so that like there's that neutrality there, where that's the line they cannot cross, you know.
Yeah, and
And we need to make sure that that strength is really strong when it comes to Ukraine, because if they can attack Ukraine and then attack a NATO country, then NATO doesn't matter anymore. you
yeah,
know?
well, but then the other thing too is like it's not like NATO doesn't have its shortcomings and stuff like that too.
No,
like
yeah.
they've been moving, and Russia keeps saying like We don't want NATO on our borders.
That's a complete they're just bullshitting there. They don't give a shit whether or not NATO's on their border.
Oh,
They're just saying that.
yeah, but you can't say that though.
I can absolutely say that.
You can't, because you don't know that's what they are saying.
No, because Putin's a really smart guy. He's incredibly smart. He knows the U.S. isn't going to attack Russia. And I don't think there's many people in Russia who actually believe that the U.S. is just hungry people who are going to eat up Russia and like take them apart. I think the idea is like NATO is very, very openly a defensive pact. Like we aren't offensive. We aren't attacking anybody. The idea is if you attack one of us, we're going to attack you, all of us, all at one time. The idea is like, and also like with Ukraine was becoming a NATO member, and then Ukraine got attacked by Russia. They're a sovereign state. They're their own people. And they're getting attacked by Russia, and we're like, okay, we need to make sure that this country stays sovereign. They can make their own decisions, and that these people can't make decisions for them.
I get where you're coming from,
Yeah.
but this is what I'm saying. You just said you can know definitively that Russia doesn't actually mean that when they say that.
It's not like I know 100, like 1,000%, but it seems like an obvious take. Like it seems like the most reasonable take there.
Would you want your enemy moving right next door to you?
Define enemy though.
Adversary.
Adversary.
What is that?
Someone
So
who's
enemy is
against
somebody
you?
who wants to invade you, who wants to take your shit, and wants to like attack you, right?
Does NATO want to take their shit?
No.
Okay, Russia does not have access to that sea now.
Mm-hmm.
Where and back in the
Because
back in the Soviet Union they did.
Mm-hmm.
They had access to all this land, right? And I think Putin, he's also said that he wants to bring the Soviet Union back and restore Russia to its full glory and stuff like that. So that's part of his plan.
Yep.
And I think that he is just this like peace loving guy, like, hey, just stay off my war. No. He definitely is malicious. Russia's always been sketchy. You can look at the whole cheating in the Olympics thing. The Icarus documentary, that's great. But there has to be some sort of little bit of truth to, like, I don't want these countries who are my adversary on my border.
But it doesn't.
Because there's a buffer area.
Yeah, because then he can't take that land, right?
The biggest argument, one of the arguments I heard is whenever NATO has moved closer to him, they've moved up all the missile defense
That's
systems.
not true.
That
That's
is-
not like missiles. We're not putting missiles on his border.
No, missile
right?
defense systems.
We can say defense systems, but that does either way, we're not doing anything to provoke him. We are very clear that we're not provoking in any way. We can say that we might put,
So I would say NATO being on Russia's border gives NATO a lot more leverage over Russia. Because even just having the missile defense systems, so now if Russia, Russia's big thing is like, oh, we have all these nukes, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now if we're in range of where their missile silos are for their nukes, and we know that we can just take them out right away, well, now they don't have that leverage over us. We took the leverage. And I think that's all it is, just slight switching back and forth of leverage. So I would agree that Putin does not want NATO on their border. And I think it could be something just as simple as that.
And the other thing too is it's not like
It's war is chess.
and I don't think Putin's looking at NATO. I don't think he's going like, wow, they are great for the world. They're so great. They're great friends with us. He is on the opposite side of NATO because he's trying to create his own version of it.
but if his version of it involves taking these people who are completely their own, have their own group, they have their own shit, and he's saying going in there and saying yeah, we're just going to take you guys and rule over you guys in a dictatorial manner. You can't. That's what I think the U.S. has to step and say, all right, you can't do that. You can't invade these random people, and you can't just keep taking these little bits and pieces of
No,
land.
I agree. I agree. But what I'm saying is, when you look at I'll give you a super simple metaphor. I know it's not the exact same, but I'll just give you just a simple metaphor to try and let you know what my brain is thinking. Let's say you have a person, you own a house, and they're standing outside the house and they're throwing rocks at your house. And then I'm sitting there standing right beside them, handing them rocks to throw at your house. Are you going to look at me and go, oh, that guy's totally fine. He's totally whatever. He's just supplying the rocks to the person to throw it and hurt my house.
Do you think that's an exact analogy of what's going on in Ukraine?
NATO is giving Ukraine tanks.
So you're saying that right now, Ukraine is the one that's attacking Russia and being violent to Russia? Because that's what the person's doing. They're throwing rocks at the house. They're being violent, and then we're giving those people.
I'm not saying it's an exact analogy.
So this is the thing. We're us, Germany, whatever, all the countries, we're giving this to them, right?
Yes.
We're not selling it to them. I think it's a much different conversation when it's like, oh, you're buying equipment from the US, but we're just dumping money, dumping equipment. So I think it is pretty close to that analogy where if you were like, oh, this guy filled up the bed of his truck with rocks down at the, quarry, we're going to go destroy that quarry now. Where it's like, well, that guy's hands, like, he might not even know what he's using these rocks for. And if he does, he's just, he argue, he's just trying to stay in business. But
I'll redo it. Michael's outside of my house, right? He's standing on the street. I walk outside, me and Michael get in an argument. I punch him in the face and beat him up. And then I walk back to my house, or I'm standing in my driveway. And then this other dude pulls up and goes, here, Michael, here's a bunch of rocks. Go throw them at that dude that just punched you or that you're fighting right now.
That's still a bit off, though. Yeah,
sure,
the
it's a
exact
bit
analogy. The analogy would be, Ukraine's the guy in the house, Russia's the guy outside, and he's throwing rocks at the house. And what we're doing is we're saying, hey, here's like some more rocks. Throw it back at the guy outside who's throwing rocks at your house.
Yeah, and now just by doing that, if I'm the person on the street throwing the rocks, even though Russia is in the wrong, I totally believe Russia is in the wrong, and if all things are true, I hope Ukraine pushes them out of their country and they come to some sort of ceasefire. And then if I'm the person in the street throwing the rocks who started the whole thing and I see somebody giving them supplies, I'm going, you're my enemy now.
He knows he doesn't like NATO. Like he obviously knows that he's not friends with NATO,
Yeah, of course.
This hasn't changed anything.
It's adding salt into the wound.
But we can't, all right, at the end of the day, we're making this super complicated. Ukraine's their own country. They're a sovereign country. They're their own people. Russia is saying, we want to take you. We want to take some of your lands. We just want this country. And what we're saying is, you can't do that. We're the world's police. We need to step up and say, you can't take Ukraine because you don't own Ukraine.
Then why don't we just go and fight?
Because we can never fight and we can't actually have a land war between the U.S. and Russia. Because if that happens, that could escalate and lead to
I know, but wouldn't that just fix the situation? It'd push Russia out, and then we'd back off and let.
Well, what if we just?
Because that's a level of escalating tensions that NATO is holding back from.
Yeah,
NATO doesn't want to do that.
And but okay, this is the thing that it's like a death by 1,000 cuts type thing. Then it's like, would you be better off just going in, fighting the thing, dealing with all the fallout, and then backing off, or this very slow, that might be escalation, that might not be escalation?
We want to take the littlest steps as possible. We don't want to make massive, huge steps that could lead to escalating tensions within Ukraine between us and Putin.
Okay, so what happens when the U.S. keeps doing what they're doing and Ukraine they lose?
What do you mean they lose? Like Ukraine doesn't make it through?
Like they get overrun.
They get overrun.
We don't see that right now.
No,
it seems like they're doing a really good job. It seems like they're actually.
It seems like that.
Okay, so shouldn't we support them if it seems like that's what's going on?
And what if it doesn't happen?
If it doesn't happen and they take over Ukraine, they take Ukraine, and then we have to fall. Then they're going to attack another country, and we do the same thing.
What if they don't?
What do you mean? What if they don't?
Well, what if
they're already looking at other countries?
What if
they've done this before in the past? Even in Ukraine in the past.
What if they take over Ukraine and they go, "Hey, I know this is hearsay. Because Germany, because you gave that, now we're close to you to Germany. Now we're fighting you too." Because
it's not Germany they'd be going for though.
Whatever. Another.
So you said that this happened in the past. They took over Ukraine. They took over almost all of Eastern Europe, right?
No, when I'm saying they did in the past, I mean 2014. They took over. They invaded Ukraine, took Crimea, and they took that little piece off in a crazy people always try and make the argument that they did it in a peaceful way, but they invaded Crimea, they took Crimea, and now they're doing that with other parts of Ukraine.
Yeah, and so then my thing, and this is just my simplistic mindset too, is just if you're gonna fucking fight, just fight and get it over with. That's my other thing too. And then here's my other thing that I always try to pull myself back to, right? And this is, I think, where anybody who thinks about the whole Ukraine situation, their opinions on, the one thing that I keep pulling myself back to is every single day that goes by, I watch all the videos that come out. Yesterday, I watched a video of a dude getting shot right in the chest at point blank inside a trench from a drone video. These aren't numbers on a page. These are people dying right now. And when you look at it like that, it's what is 10,000 to 500,000 lives? What's it worth? Is it is it worth trying to figure out a ceasefire and giving Russia a little bit of the territory they want so that less people, and I'm not trying to make like, hey, this is the point that I believe in, but when does that become part of the argument? When does that become part of the discussion?
Who do you think should make that decision of who like, because right now Ukraine is like in this conflict. They're at the risk of losing basically all their rights, all their democratic rights. They're going to be taken over, and a puppet state, just like Belarus, right above them, they're going to put in a guy, and they're going to say this guy is now the leader for 4,000 years, but he's going to be somehow democratically elected, and they're going to rig elections. They're going to do all that stuff. Who has the right to say that whether or not they want this stuff to happen to them, or who has the right to say like whether or not they're okay with the deaths or not okay?
Ukraine.
Exactly. So why don't they make that decision, and then we support them based on that decision because they're a sovereign state?
Yeah, I agree. But I'm saying nobody is pushing that at all.
What do you mean?
I'm pretty sure the leader of either Germany or UK said Ukraine was in peace talks or in a ceasefire conversation with Russia, and Germany said you better not go on with the ceasefire. Said you better not do that, or it was the UK or something like that.
I think it was the UK.
One of the leaders, I think, it might have been the UK. said like, no, you shouldn't be going into negotiations and peace talk.
From my understanding, there's like no right now. Russia is mobilizing around them and getting ready for another attack. So there's no.
There's going to be a big attack coming in the spring.
The idea could be, now I haven't read that scenario, but it could be like they're saying like, hey, don't go into peace talks because if you go into peace talks, you take stuff out and then like they attack again, you know, because they're obviously not going to follow any like peace talk rules.
So here, what question for both of you, what should the US/NATO do in this situation?
And with my, limited knowledge on world politics and stuff like that, and wars, and I have read a lot about wars and the history of different wars and understanding the way things happen in the end, as far as like a 30,000 foot view, a little bit. I think that what should happen is it should be pushed that there should be some sort of ceasefire, some sort of stop to the death and the killing, because both sides now are losing people. Okay, let's before I say what I'm gonna say, we'll read the comments. Someone said, "Oh, Joe Biden, LOL." Caleb said he's not really fit to serve as president, let alone do anything on his own outside of a retirement home. LOL. And then throw in all these things happen to him now in the news, but the alternative isn't any better. Harris. So just some
banter.
Some LOL Joe Biden slander, which we've talked about before in the past. But I think at a bare minimum, and this is coming from me as just a moral thing, like trying to mitigate the amount of life lost. Like, let's say, I don't agree with this. I don't want this to happen. But if Russia takes a chunk so that they can get access, is it the Black Sea right there? What sea is that right there?
Yeah, whatever they say.
Whatever sea it is right there. If they say, hey, we'll give you this access to this sea if we can agree on a ceasefire so we can stop the death of our Slavic people. We're both Slavic countries. And then inside that contract, maybe NATO themselves says, we're going to be part of this peace deal contract. In Russia, if you do X, Y, or Z, there will be zero... There'll be full retaliation if you overstep this boundary.
But that's super weak. That's
yeah, sure. It can be weak for the point of time to stop the death of the people going on. And then if Russia goes, if Russia does what Germany did, like Germany in the 1930s, late 1930s, they mobilized, they invaded Poland, was it Czechoslovakia first?
Yeah, Czechoslovakia, and then Russia and Germany attacked Poland.
Yeah, if like this, I think after Poland, I think everyone started declaring war. I think something kind of like that. Like, hey, if you overstep your boundary one more time, like because I everyone who's the leader of the UK during that time period, Chamberlain. Everyone was saying he was like super, super weak, but I understand where he's coming from. Like they just got out of World War I, where millions and millions of people died, and it's like, we're never gonna fight another war like this ever again. and then some evil person does something stupid and they go. But what I'm saying is like, have the ceasefire at least come to a point where you have some talks where you can start to understand points of view. I'm not saying have a peace treaty. I'm saying agree to a ceasefire where you're not killing anybody more, and then agree to speak to each other and have NATO and other people help go.
So, yeah, so that's your take. I want to hear Matthew's take.
So I don't think there's a misunderstanding of what people want. I think overall, people say they want things, say they want certain things. But at the end of the day, I think it's clear that Russia wants to kind of invade and take pieces of Ukraine. And we can say like, all right, we can make these negotiations where we can give them parts of Ukraine. But it kind of, for those people in Ukraine, you're basically like just giving away all their rights and giving all, like those people, like if they want to be a part of Ukraine, they should be part of Ukraine, you know? Because there's a lot, those states or whatever they were talking about.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
But even those people who live there who want that, are they willing to give up? And some of them are. And I would think even as Americans, we understand this. We're willing to give up
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
We're willing to die on the hill. Like that's who we are as Americans, you know, for what we believe in. And I'm not saying that Ukraine shouldn't do that. I'm just saying, like, is there a point in time when we should just fully step in? Or do we just keep on, keep on playing it from the outside type thing? Like either, all I'm trying to say is either step in and do way more or step in and don't do more.
Mm-hmm. My thing is that at the end of the day, it's up to the Ukrainians because it's their state. They decide what they want to do. And if there's this massive loss of life and they're like all killing each other and they want to end the war, that's fine. But we would look super, super weak if we just pulled out and said, Ukraine, fight it yourself, because we are those people that step in. And whenever something like this happens, where a sovereign state, where some country does something unethical to another country with their own rules, we are the police. We need to step in and to enforce things that help us, like NATO.
So you do believe that the U.S. should be
not be like
police force
directly
of the world.
involved. Yeah, I think that in general that we have that sort of duty in a way, and not because like it's just that's just what we have to do. We have to endure this, and it sucks for us. I think it helps us because then we can make NATO. We can make it so that less countries have nuclear arms, and we can lessen the chance of nuclear war ever breaking out between like two small countries.
Yeah.
Overall, if you're asking my conspiratorial opinion, I would say that the main reason people are against wanting to pull out of Ukraine is because Biden's supporting Ukraine. And people are like, we don't like Biden. We're trying to find a way to hate Biden. Just like the Afghanistan pullout. We didn't like the Afghanistan pullout. It was technically a bad thing in these ways, so we're going to hate Biden for it when they're not looking at the good that it's doing in a way. We're like, right now, we're like, Ukraine's winning the war. They're doing a really good job. If they beat Russia...
There's a lot of debate on that.
No, I have absolutely...
I think Ukraine is a pretty good example of that. I don't think the Afghanistan pullout is.
I think that was a good thing overall, though. I think
no, I'm saying people just taking sides because of political parties.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people who don't have that, but I think a lot of the people who were involved, like the main social media and everything, they came in, which obviously, if I'm arguing against social media, I'm not arguing against you, but they came in because they were like, we don't like Biden. We want to show something that he's doing that's bad.
Yeah, and I could agree with you with Ukraine, it's because it's hard. Because all that I see that I don't like to agree with, or I don't want to agree with all this, is just the frivolous spending in a failing economy, way too much money. And then is there any accountability? What's the total of billions of dollars? And we're just now giving them equipment.
I think that we did a lot more for them beforehand. We did a lot of training for them beforehand. We gave them missile launcher or guidance systems in general. We did a lot for them beforehand, which is where that money's going. But
I would say with the U.S. giving billions, it's got to be at least 100 billion by now, right? If not more.
Maybe. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Ukraine should. I don't know. I feel like they should be much further along than where they are, and that's not me criticizing Ukrainian soldiers, whatever. They're in the trenches.
They're definitely winning.
But I don't think that. Man, they're getting all of this money, and I know there's conspiracies about how the money's being laundered, from the U.S. is giving it to Ukraine. Ukraine gave it to, what's that?
FTX.
FTX. FTX was giving it back as political funding because, I don't know.
The big conspiracy is NATO, which is pretty much the U.S. like we talked about before. NATO is saying no, Ukraine is our puppet country, and Russia is going no, we want it to be our puppet country.
Does Ukraine want to be part of NATO, or do they want to be part of the Russia?
They want to be part of NATO, but what I'm
Okay.
saying is you have this and I don't even want to get into all this, but you have the whole, Biden's son on the board of Burisma, and even though he wasn't qualified.
Don't get into the Hunter Biden laptop. So
I'm not getting a Hunter Biden laptop. He was on that board in Ukraine.
Yeah, under like, are you talking about like the oil thing or the
oil thing.
Yeah, no, that makes
He
sense.
was on that board.
But why was he on that board?
It doesn't matter. I'm not getting into that.
Okay.
You can look into the information yourself, and he probably shouldn't have been there.
He definitely should have been there. I mean, like, not that he should. I don't think there's any reason for him not to be there. I think there's a whole lot of reason for him to be there.
We can talk about that another time.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms to be.
What are your opinions on the video of Biden saying like keeping the $1 billion from them if they don't fire the prosecutor?
I would need to fully look into that.
No, the video of Biden saying that. I told them I'm not giving them the $1 billion if they don't fire this prosecutor, and then sure enough, they fired the prosecutor. There's a video of him saying that.
No, yeah, I've seen that video.
Okay, what is your opinion on that video of those words?
The
prosecutor was investigating the company that his son was on the board of.
I think there's a lot more to that scenario than just what he said. I have to fully look into it again because it's been a while since I've seen that data. But if you want to have a whole topic about it, I'll definitely do it.
I think it's just scammy. And anyone who looks at it from normal eyes say the same thing.
But like, why? Okay, so let's just like, why was he on that board to begin with?
No one really knows.
Because whenever those companies go and like create like a board, they're not looking for like people who are like engineers and those people who know a lot about oil. They're looking for like, what are the biggest name brands I could put on my board? What?
They're looking for the lobbyists.
They're looking for people that look really good so they can sell their company to other companies saying, we have like this Biden name person on our board. We have these people on our board. We're popular. We have this backing, or this sort of like name brand. That's what they're going for whenever they have those people on the board.
I just don't believe them.
And Ben Shapiro even said that.
Can we all just agree that the world is run by elites and all of this is just a stage and none of it really matters because they're all drinking wine together on Epstein Island anyways?
Yeah, we're going to end with that right there. Thank you guys for checking out. We went way past our 2-hour mark, but thank you guys for checking us out. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate it. Discord links down in the description.